Commissioner McDonough, you have the agenda, correct?
I do.
All right. The meeting of the Ramsey County Board of Commissioners is called to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Fretham. Fretham. You're on mute.
Here.
Thank you. Matas Castillo.
Here.
McDonough.
Here.
McGuire.
Here.
Ortega.
Aye.
Reinhardt.
Here.
Carter.
Here. Thank you very much. We will all mute our mics and ask Commissioner McDonough to please say the Pledge of Allegiance for us. Thank you, Commissioner.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Commissioner McDonough. The agenda of September 22nd, revised and final, is before you. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions, comments, changes for the agenda? If not, thank you. Will the clerk please call the roll?
McDonough.
Aye.
McGuire.
Aye.
Ortega.
Aye.
Reinhardt.
Aye.
Fretham.
Aye.
Matas Castillo.
Aye.
Carter.
Aye. And thank you. The agenda has passed, and the minutes of our September 15th meeting are before you for a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any questions or additions or changes to the minutes? Thank you very much. Would the clerk please call the roll?
McDonough.
Aye.
McGuire.
Aye.
Ortega.
Aye.
Reinhardt.
Aye.
Fretham.
Aye.
Matas Castillo.
Aye.
Carter.
Aye. Thank you very much. The minutes are passed, and I'll turn immediately to our county board or to our county manager for the COVID update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, good morning. Good to be with you on this Tuesday. I'm going to turn it over to the Director of Public Health, Kathy Hadeen, to kick us off.
Good morning, and thank you, County Manager O'Connor, and thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Here's the current COVID situation update in Minnesota and Ramsey County, and we will go on over to the dashboard to show the situation. In Minnesota, 90,942 people have tested positive for COVID-19. That's an additional 6,000 people in the last week. Since September 17th, the state has seen anywhere from 900 to 1,300 cases per day. The end of August and September have seen some of the highest case days than any other days since we started tracking the pandemic in Minnesota. Total cases requiring hospitalization to date across the state is 7,199. Hospitalized as of yesterday is 255 in the state. The hospitalizations have gone up, and hospitalized in the ICU as of yesterday is 128, and that actually has gone down a bit. 2,021 people have died from COVID across the state. That's an additional 44 people in the last week. The total approximate number of completed tests is 1,855,308, and that's over 100,000 tests that were completed in the last week. We will move over to the Ramsey County update. As you can see, the new cases by day, I expect those last few days over there on, I think, my right, will go up as the data comes in from MDH this week with the high case counts. Although reports are showing that the higher case counts are in the southern part of our state. If we scroll further down, you'll see the cumulative case rate per 10,000 residents and the weekly case rate, which went from 9.4 actually down to 7.1. And the weekly case rate as of September 5th was actually down to 4.7. So those are good metrics for us. They're under 5%, which is what we're looking for. It means we have a good amount of testing and people are getting, hopefully, the help that they need if they are sick. Let's scroll down to the cumulative totals. We've had over 10,599 people who have tested positive to date in Ramsey County. If you scroll down a little bit more, you'll be able to see those numbers. That's 600 more people in the last week, and unfortunately, we've lost an additional 7 people with a total of 332 people who have lost their lives to COVID. We will move on over to the testing page as I want to highlight a lot of testing that we have going on in our community over the next week and months. We are currently offering multiple testing events this week, beginning tomorrow, September 23rd, from 2 to 6 at the Mexican Consulate. Emphasis there is on people who speak Spanish or identify as Hispanic, Latino, Latina. Staff and volunteers who speak Spanish will be on site to help answer any questions. There will also be 2 testing events at Mount Olivet Baptist Church focused on the Black African American community this Thursday and Friday, September 24th and 25th from 2 to 6 p.m. And then beginning this Saturday, September 26th, we will resume our Aldrich Arena testing site from 1 to 6 p.m. You can find our team there every Saturday throughout the fall. These testing sites are in partnership with the Mexican Consulate, CLUES, Minnesota Community Care, St. Mary's Health Clinic, Stair Step Foundation, Minnesota Department of Health, and mHealth Fairview. We're also working with Minnesota Department of Health to add additional community testing sites which will be known soon. You can sign up for these testing events on our website at www.ramseycounty.us/COVID, and you can click on the testing site link and then click on the language that you need, and you'll be turned over to where you can register for a testing event. I will now turn it back over to County Manager O'Connor.
Thank you, Director Hedin. I think it is a testament of the community and collective strength happening as we continue to hear more names of organizations and parties involved in the community testing that continues to be offered across Ramsey County, and something that will be important as we head into the fall and the winter. A few brief updates from me, and then we'll stand for any questions. A week ago, when we talked about COVID-19, one of the questions that was asked was about stories from others in our organization and their experiences. I would direct board members and all staff to this week's From the County Manager column focused on this topic. Many have written in and shared those stories, and we'll share themes, broad themes and lessons and continued areas of work as a part of this week's column to lift up the voice of many across different areas in our organization. To every employee who's spent time sharing their story with myself or with others, a continued thank you. It takes courage to do that, and it's important that we respect the privacy of people as we talk about the themes with their stories so that not everyone has to live their COVID experience out with everyone else to know, but to continue to acknowledge that as a large collective of 4,000 people, we are learning a lot as an organization, and we need to continue to learn and grow, and I look forward to elevating those messages today. As we look at the emergency period, one of the common questions that you all have continued to check in on, and we have heard from other avenues as well, is how long will the emergency period go? I have no answer that I come with today on that particular topic. It moves at the course of the virus and our ability to contain it. However, this week the governor has announced some preliminary ideas around thresholds at the state level for emergency orders and how long emergency orders may stay in effect. They're nothing right now that has been set in stone, but it was an exploratory and initial look at a conversation. As we close today's COVID-19 update here in a moment or move into the discussion phase, Madam Chair, I would be interested in any thoughts board members have about aligning Ramsey County's emergency period explicitly with the direction laid out by the governor, which is obviously flexible and may change over time. But my best answer right now to the question would be our attempt as the largest public health agency in the state of Minnesota and as one of the largest county governments is to be as consistent as possible to remove ambiguity or confusion with others. And so open to any thoughts or discussion, or if we need to lead to a broader policy discussion around that at a future meeting, but something that is clearly out there and on the radar, and I wanted to bring before you all today. Finally, as we balance competing needs to transact business and look at other areas of work that ramp up, notably elections during a general election season, but all the other work that continues across the organization. And we work with the board to ensure that we are bringing you the most timely and relevant information and the best opportunity to discuss it in full. We are going to move to a little less than every week on our COVID-19 update as a general plan moving forward. For weeks where we have service team committee of the whole updates, which are more meaty and take up a significant portion of time, you will not see a COVID-19 update as of October for those particular weeks. I want to stress that if there are questions from the board, we will make sure during County Connections to get those questions about COVID-19 so that we can provide responses quickly. And if at any moment Public Health feels the need to bring a COVID-19 update to the board due to pressing public health information, there is no schedule planning that will override that. We will work with the chair to seek to add a COVID-19 update to the agenda. But hopefully this is a way to continue to balance the need to provide timely and relevant information to the board and the broader public with the need to ensure that other information and actions also receive the public attention and discussion that they need as we move through a long pandemic period together. With that, Madam Chair, the director and I would stand for any questions that you may have, and thank you for your time. This concludes this morning's COVID-19 update.
Thank you very much for the update, noting that testing is up and our positivity rate trending down, and those are good things. And that also we're in very, very good company as you share with us the number of community organizations that continue to assist in addressing this COVID emergency. Very much appreciation for all that you've shared and for the adjustment of our meetings to ensure that we are able to hear our COVID updates, that we are able also to fit in the workshops that we need to do, and that we also have good time for County Connections and for our legislative update and board updates as well. I do have a number of hands raised. I know that today we have a workshop inside our board meeting. We will take questions and then move on to the balance of our agenda. I have Commissioner Maris Castillo and then Commissioner Reinhardt. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. And more just a quick comment to Ryan's question about where we sit with alignment with the governor. And I just want to say that I do support, alignment for the sake of consistency and continuity and really to the broader message for our community. But that said, I also think that we have a laser focus on what's right for our specific communities. And so I appreciate the idea of alignment. I really also want to say that I have complete trust and confidence in our own public health here in Ramsey County and the approach that we have really taken on our communities of color and our most vulnerable populations. And so I would just want us to, when it's possible and appropriate, but if we need to do more, that we do more and that we allow ourselves and not constrain ourselves just for the sake of alignment, but that we, when it's appropriate, that we align, but if we need to do more, that we maintain that control for our community.
Thank you very much. I'll go to Commissioner Reinhardt and then Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you. I agree with Commissioner Matos Castillo about the need to be flexible, and I know that our county has done that in the past. One size doesn't fit all, and when you see some of the COVID numbers and from the state versus Ramsey County, I think it does tell a different story. So we need to remain flexible and provide those services, alignment where we can. And I think most of what we do probably will be aligned, but we need to make sure that we can meet those needs. As far as the COVID-19 update every week, I understand, obviously, that we have to make time for the other business that we have to do. I would hope that even though we don't necessarily have the update given orally, that we can have a COVID-19 as part of our agenda update so that we can provide a fact sheet or something that gives us those numbers, because I think it is important that people continue to pay attention to it, and the less we talk about it, the less we provide data as far as what is happening, the more folks may think that it's not as important, and it is. And so I do think that I understand the need for the time for us to work and do our business, but I also think that we need to make sure that it stays in everybody's radar so that it doesn't appear that it's not something we have to deal with. And especially for those that are getting tested or in the hospital or people who lose their lives, I think it's incredibly important to make sure that we are honoring the folks that are doing the work and offering support to the families who are suffering because of it. So I hope that we would have that on our agenda every week. It doesn't have to be something that's actually presented at the county board meeting, but if people want the updated information, it would be available through through our agenda. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. County Manager, did you want to share anything on that point? I would just say that we do have our dashboard and the opportunity to reflect weekly that the dashboard is updated and additional information can be found there. That as the information becomes standardized and we can get people to be able to look there, I think that that helps us quite a bit, and your point is very valid. We want to keep it front and center and ensure that people do not believe this is something that is winding down at this point, as it is not. We have much more to look forward to with our community. So I will turn to the County Manager for any additional comment on that before moving then to Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioner Reinhardt. I think, if I heard you correctly, ensuring that there is a direct way to access that information from the agenda each week, whether or not there's a verbal COVID briefing, we will explore that and find the best way to do that, whether that be a link to the testing site information specifically, the COVID-19 dashboard. If I heard that wrong, please clarify, but otherwise we will ensure to do that, and we can make that happen as a part of our plan moving forward.
That is exactly what I wanted to see. Thank you.
And thank you very much. Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I agree with Commissioner Reinhardt and Commissioner Matos Castillo on both of their points. I think that we should align with the state as much as possible, but continue to be flexible, because I do think that our public health department has a great pulse on our community, and we should be standing ready to either be more strict or less as we see fit. So I do think that that we can look to the state for guidance, but then be flexible on our own for how we proceed. And then I want to echo Commissioner Reinhardt's comments about keeping keeping the COVID report part of our agenda, if only to just direct people to it, because I think it's very dangerous that people think we're coming out of it. We no longer talk about it on our board meetings. We don't do this. I mean, we're heading into indoor time period now, where I'm really nervous that people are going to continue to be more lax, and we're going to, unfortunately, I'm worried we're heading into a more a period of more cases. So I just hope we don't model that we think this is not as important anymore. And I'm just worried that by taking it off our agenda, we might give that signal, even though we know we're not, even though our dashboard is. So I just encourage us to think about that. So just that acknowledgement that we know this is still out there, we're still dealing with it. So with that, and then Madam Chair and County Manager, I have one question on the COVID report, if I could ask that. We did hear this weekend about the opening of the DEC Center in Duluth for saliva testing, and I'm excited that part of the state is getting that. And I'm just curious what the plans are for us to get to that. I know that's probably a pilot site for the state, and that we are going to see how that goes. And just curious if I expect we're part of those discussions, and if you have any other comments on when we might see some of that.
Madam Chair, Commissioner McGuire, I'll answer the previous part of your question first, then turn it over to Director Hadeen to go specifically to your question about the deck. Two pieces. I don't in any way want to construe today's schedule shift or way in which we're trying to approach the balancing of various agenda items as any suggestion that COVID is lessening in terms of its importance or its concern across our community. Our dashboard shows the daily impact that this virus has across this community. It has a daily impact on our employees that both is short and long term, and it is something that we need to remain ever vigilant with the board in working on. And so even these current plans need to be able to be adjusted as we move into the fall and winter. And just like we do with the incident management team, we are trying to meter out our available time each day to where the biggest priority demand and need is, while remaining ever vigilant that we remain in an emergency period with a global pandemic. And our best comp from 100 years ago shows multiple waves as complacency became an issue. And so I just want to acknowledge that part, that this is not meant to be set in stone, maybe an attempt to try to balance some of the other pieces that we know the board has cared about and wanted time to ensure we discuss. And on weeks when we hopefully have a lighter update to share and can do some of that digitally, we will do that. I will turn to Director Hadeen to answer the second half of your question.
Madam Chair and Commissioner McGuire, thanks for asking that question. I was happy to hear, too, that Duluth was ready to go with their semi-permanent site at the deck. St. Paul and Ramsey County have also been identified as a county and a community that will have a semi-permanent site. We are a little different than our Duluth friends in that we have a very diverse county. And so right now we're working with the city of St. Paul to identify the best site that we could use for this. We need to make sure that it's in a community with access to transportation that allows people to walk up in the fall time, in the spring, but also has indoor area and parking and maybe even a drive-through. And so we're trying to find a diamond in the rough right now for the type of building that is available that isn't being used for something else. So we're working with the SEOC at the state and their testing leads. We're working with the city to identify a site, and I think we are getting closer to finding one, because those sites need to open soon. And we're excited that our state will have its own saliva testing lab soon. Right now, it's not up and running, and so testing kits will be sent to New Jersey, actually, and then results will be sent back here to Minnesota. But it is in the works. We're working on a final site, and when that information is ready to go, we will make sure that we provide it to you here.
Thank you so much for all of that. I really appreciate it. So we look forward to that. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner McGuire. Commissioner Fretham.
Thank you, Chair Carter. In terms of alignment with the state, can I just ask a question to clarify that? In aligning with their metrics, when looking statewide, I'm trying to think this through. It's possible that the state as a whole could be meeting the governor's metrics, but Ramsey County, just because of our different measures, could not be at those state metrics yet. So we would consider ourselves still in the emergency potentially at those metrics, and would consider keep our emergency order in place till we hit metrics. Is that? Am I thinking this through correctly?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Fretham, I think today was actually an opportunity just to kind of hear some of where commissioners may be at on the topic to begin with, quite frankly. So we don't come with any preconceived idea of exactly how to apply it. But I would say, based on the previous comments and then yours, that's something I jotted down on my notes before you had a chance to even say that, which is we don't seem to have any issue with the metrics likely being laid out for statewide measurement of an emergency period. Ensuring that the thresholds have been met on a localized scale in Ramsey County could be extremely important, particularly as we think about being the most urbanized, most diverse county in the state. And it's ensuring that we don't leave the emergency period early just because other areas may have a different behavior. And so there is that part of the flexibility that would likely be something we need to consider. And I appreciate the thoughts that you and your colleagues have shared here as we try to balance this idea around consistency with a strong and robust public health approach.
Thank you very much.
I just want to kind of know what alignment means before we were to commit to it. I don't think I have a problem with the metrics themselves. It's just a matter of thinking through it.
Thank you very much. And so I have no further hands up. In conclusion, I'd just like to summarize that we will continue to address our community and our community's needs as we look to metrics and guidance and alignment with the state to ensure that we have that alignment, but that we're also able to be as flexible as possible based on our community's needs. We will continue to reference our COVID update during our board members and during our board meetings, and we'll be working to ensure that that is done in the very best and most appropriate way based on our current circumstances, so that we are able to ensure that people can find the information that is needed and will hear the information that is most salient for the moment. We will continue, as we have in the past, also to conduct our moments of silence based on our ongoing emergency. And at this point in time, I would ask board members for a brief moment of silence to recognize those who have been impacted by COVID-19 in our community and its ongoing impact on all of us. For just a few moments of silence, please. Thank you very much. And that concludes our COVID update period. I'll call on Commissioner McDonough for our administrative agenda. Commissioner.
Thanks, Chair Carter. We have one item, item number 3. I'll move item number 3, grant award for Center for Tech and Civic Life for Elections COVID-19 response.
Second.
Thank you very much. There is a motion and a second on the grant award from the Center for Tech and Life for Elections COVID-19 response. Are there any questions, comments on this agenda item?
Madam Chair.
County Manager, thank you.
If there are no specific questions, I would acknowledge, if the board so wishes to hear it, we do have Deputy Director from Property Tax Records and Election Services, Heather Bessler, here today. She could come up and talk a little bit about the specifics of how the money will be invested. Deputy County Manager Karen Francois has also joined us virtually today and can be a part of any follow-up questions that come that way. I want to acknowledge the hard work of staff in applying for the grant and ensuring that it aligns with our work as we continue to both do all the work that we can on our own, but recognize that when opportunities like this come along to go farther and drive deeper, we want to take every advantage to ensure accessible, welcoming, free and fair elections across Ramsey County. So if it pleases the chair, I will ask Deputy Director Bessler to come up and say a few words.
I think that board members would very much appreciate hearing a little more about this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Property Tax and Election Services. Thank you for having me this morning. I'm happy to speak more about this amazing opportunity for our county and for our department. The Center for Tech and Civic Life is a nonprofit that whose main focus is on election accessibility and safety and security. And they received $250 million in the form of a grant to provide critical resources to local governments who are administering elections. The time period for the grant is June 15th.
We continue to both do all the work that we can on our own, but
the time period for the grant is June 15th through the end of the year. It covers expenses that we've already incurred for the primary election, and it will cover expenses that we expect to incur for the general election. It does require reporting at the end of January of 2021 to provide an update on what and how we've spent the money, but it does not require any matching funds. We have been working with finance on setting up how to track the expenses to make sure that they're being spent appropriately and tracked for that reporting component. But most importantly, this grant really allows us to supplement the existing budget and to provide critical support for new and enhanced services for the general election. It allows us to hire adequate staffing levels for absentee voting, compensating for illness or fatigue in our staff. It also allows us to hire an additional 500 election judges for Election Day. For a presidential primary election, we would typically hire around 2,000 judges. We plan on adding an additional 500 judges to that complement for a total of 2,500 judges, also allowing for illness and fatigue within our election judge corps. It allows us to replace old election equipment and bring in new equipment, additional equipment, and equipment that is aimed to enhance the voter experience. It'll allow us to expand our curbside voting opportunities for absentee voting and election day voting. It will allow us to expand our already robust set of plans for absentee in-person ballot drop-off sites. And it'll allow us to expand on the events that we plan to hold for in-person absentee ballot drop-off. I'm happy to share with you that the county is partnering with the Minnesota Loons, Minnesota's pro soccer team, to provide an in-person ballot drop-off event the 7 days prior to the election at Allianz Field. We will have our staff there along with representatives from the Loons on nights, weekends, during the days to provide an opportunity to all Ramsey County residents to drop off their ballots at that location. This grant allows us to build on current voter outreach, mainly focusing on community and local media, to continue to utilize our community partners, possibly even in new ways, and then to ensure an accurate and secure election by building on current cybersecurity practices. Thank you, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you very much. This election, any election, is a big deal, and to have a blessing such as this come right prior to our general election is so very fortunate for us. Thank you for highlighting the opportunity. We have been talking about drop boxes, expansion, making certain that we are able to highlight this opportunity to vote, even if people come out only to their mailboxes this year. And of course, that is an opportunity that will keep us safe, and for those who want to make sure they get to us by dropping them off in a drop box or coming out to vote in person. So thank you for all of the work that you did quickly to organize around this opportunity. I know that Director Francoise is in the audience, and I had the opportunity to talk with her as this was transpiring and just applaud the great work that all of you were able to do to capture this opportunity. I would turn back to the county manager or ask if the deputy is in our space right now, if she might want to make a few comments before we close this off.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I believe she is in your space virtually, so I'll turn it over to Deputy County Manager Francois.
Thank you, Chair Carter and Commissioners and County Manager O'Connor. Thank you, Heather, also, and the entire elections team. You guys have continued to amaze me and others in your diligence to ensure a fair and just election for our residents and our voters. And I just want to say how much I appreciate you for doing that. And I mentioned to Chair Carter when we talked last week that I said to Heather, she's been here for 6 months. And, you know, this is an amazing 6 months for her to be able to help us get this grant. So all I really want to say is thanks to the team. You guys are great, and I am so very proud of you. Thank you.
Once again, thank you, Deputy Manager, for the work that your entire team did in moving forward in this opportunity. I will call on Commissioner McGuire before we move forward to the vote. Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few questions, and I want to echo Deputy County Manager Francois' thanks and gratitude to the whole election team for all their great work. I know today it's National Voter Registration Day, so it's appropriate that we're hearing a conversation about what we're doing for our voting. And I just have a few questions about about drop boxes. So I've been saying drop boxes, and I've been saying to our community we're going to have drop boxes. But what I'm noticing, and I see in the grant that the drop boxes aren't applicable. Is that just because the grant money isn't being used, or we're just not calling them drop boxes? We're calling them drop off locations. I just want to make sure that I'm using the right terms, because I don't want to be guilty of giving a false sense of what's happening out there. So people are not going to be able to just put their ballots in a box. They're going to drop it off to a person at a drop-off location. And so it's not a 24/7 drop box, as how I had been imagining it. And so if I could just get that clarification of the drop boxes versus the drop-off locations.
Thank you very much for that question, Commissioner McGuire. I'll turn to Heather Bessler. Is Heather still there? Yep. Or Deputy Karen Francois, or the County Manager?
Madam Chair, Deputy Director Bessler will take the question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner McGuire, you are correct. In the grant application, we specifically did not call out or request any funds for the use of secure drop boxes. The county currently has a few secure drop boxes that it utilizes for other documents. While voters can certainly put their voted ballots in those drop boxes and it'll get to our office, we are encouraging voters to return their voted absentee ballots to us in person, so we can ensure that the needed information is on that return envelope, so those ballots can be accepted right away and do not have to be rejected, and to slow the process down for that voter.
I appreciate that. And so when they do bring it in person, is that an enter into the building in person kind of thing, or can they do it from their car? I know we had this kind of conversation back when we heard from your department previously, but just to be clear for the viewing public, that will some of them be dropped off by car, or do you have to get out of your car and bring it into the location? Because then it goes to my next question, which would be at Allianz Field with the loons. Are they accepting them at each person's car, or how is the event how is that event going? Are they taking the ballots themselves?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioner McGuire. For those in-person ballot return locations, voters can walk into those facilities and return in person. They can also return those voted ballots via curbside service. Our signs, we updated our signs for the general election to read, call this number for curbside voting or to drop off your voted absentee ballot. So they call the number, our staff comes out, greets them at their car, and will review that voted absentee ballot envelope to make sure the proper information is on there. So no need for them to get out of their car. For the event at Allianz Field with the Minnesota Loons, it will run much in the same fashion as those other drop-off sites. They can either come into, voters can either park and come into the building, or there will be drive-up lanes for voters to drive up, and they will be greeted by our staff, and they will accept their voted absentee ballot there.
Thank you so much. And just to be clear, when will that all be happening? I mean, we have voting centers open now, and I'm pleased to say we had lots of people voting on Friday, which was the first day. So are those drop-off locations available now for people and curbside at each of those ballot locations? Okay.
Thank you. Madam Chair, Commissioner McGuire, we currently have 9 in-person ballot return locations operating at our service centers, being staffed by our navigators at the Plato building, at our early voting locations, and with some of those City of St. Paul libraries that are the community workforce outreach centers as well. So those 9 are functioning right now, and as we learn how voters are going to vote for this election, we will begin possibly opening new sites as demand calls for it.
Thank you so much. And just my final question is, I'm excited that we're bringing in 500 new judges. I was thinking we wouldn't need as many new judges for voting day because so many people are going to be voting early or voting absentee. So, but you still think we need the extra 500 judges for election day, even with all the early voting and things. I'm hopeful that means that we are having a turnout that we are going to need that many. Just if you could comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioner McGuire. We still plan to have all 170 polling places open for Election Day. We are not consolidating any polling places. So we do need the full complement of judges for those 170 polling places. But we would like to add the additional 500 judges to make sure that the judges can answer any questions voters may have in regards to COVID-19 procedures, to ensure that there's social distancing happening for line management, just to make sure that voters are receiving a positive experience when they come to the polls.
And my last question is are you still accepting judge applications, or is your complement good, or are you still, can people still apply to be an election judge?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioner McGuire. We are still accepting election judge applications. We have received a lot of applications, which we're very, very excited about. We're in the process of hiring the full 2,500 election judges, but we are still looking for judges who are bilingual or represent the communities that the polling places serve. So we still encourage voters and citizens to apply to serve as election judges.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for all your work, and this is a great grant.
Thank you.
Grant receipt. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions to daylight those specifics, Commissioner McGuire. And I'll turn to Commissioner Reinhardt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's important because I had quite a discussion with the election folks about the drop-off, drop-box or drop-off locations and what it means in different locations, even throughout our county. And I think it's important for the public to know that it's not about our capacity to have drop boxes that are available 24/7. This is about what is allowed and what is silent in state statute regarding voting, and where a ballot comes from and where it needs to be deposited. It has to go back to where you got your ballot from in the first place for absentee. And so it's because I know I asked myself, well, why can't we just have drop boxes? And yes, there is a certain making sure that you get your ballot and that it counts. So in case you forgot to sign it or you did something, you catch that right away, and that's really important. But the security of our system and what is in state statute is incredibly important, so that there will be, so that everybody is confident that when they are casting their ballot, regardless of how they do it, that it will be counted and it won't be challenged because of what's in state statute. So there are other states, there are other locations that are doing things differently, but I know that our elections department has really gone over this with the finest tooth comb they could find to make sure that every ballot that is cast will be counted and not somehow rejected on a technicality within state statute, because there is conflicting, which often happens, conflicting language on what will be accepted and not. So it sounds like we've just decided to do something that makes it more cumbersome in some ways, because, you know, dropping something in a drop box is certainly more convenient, but we want to make sure the integrity of what we're doing really matters here. I think it's also important to note, I know that what I was told anyhow, this is anecdotal, is that if you ordered an absentee ballot or you are getting an absentee ballot, that when you go, you can take it to the early voting locations. And I know that one election judge anyhow told a friend of mine that if they had their absentee ballot, that they didn't have to wait in line, that there was a way to just go ahead and present that, because people still like the idea of in-person voting as well. So there are many different options here, all of which have been carefully thought through by our elections department, and I applaud not only the grant and the work that you did with that, but the tenacity with which you took this on as far as making sure that every vote counted. I think it's also important for people to understand that they can go in and track that ballot. If it's mailed in or however it gets there. If they've submitted an absentee ballot, they can see that not only did it arrive, but that it has been accepted so that it will be counted. All of this is so incredibly important, but I didn't want to leave the impression that our staff was taking the easy way out, because they are not. In fact, this is much more cumbersome for them, but we are assured that our ballots will count. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Reinhardt. I think that we've heard from all who have spoken, and also see on the faces of those who have not just now, great support for the work that all of you have done in making application for this grant, and across the board in making voting easy for Ramsey County residents. The extent to which you have gone to ensure that the details are being wrapped up and that every vote counts is greatly appreciated. We have no further questions or comments in that regard, and are ready then to vote on this motion on the grant award from the Center for Tech and Civic Life for elections during COVID-19. And so, would the clerk please call the roll?
McDonough?
Aye.
McGuire?
Aye.
Ortega?
Aye.
Reinhardt?
Aye.
Fretham?
Aye.
Mas Castillo?
Aye.
Carter?
Aye. And thank you very much. That very exciting opportunity has passed. And claps are up on the screen as well. We have one policy item on the agenda. It is to reconsider and amend a resolution for our 2021 budget, which certifies the maximum levy for the proposed property tax notice. We adopted it on September 15th, and except for one small error, it is fine. We are now voting to correct that error, and that is to ensure that the year shows as 2021 and not as 2018, which somehow slipped by us. Are there any, is there a motion and a second?
Madam Chair, I would like to move a reconsideration and amending the resolution for the 2021 budget, which of course is, as we said last week, at 0.0% levy increase for 2021.
Second.
Thank you for the motion for the second. Are there any questions on this? I'll ask the clerk then to please call the roll.
McDonough,
Aye.
McGuire,
Aye.
Ortega,
Aye.
Reinhardt,
Aye.
Fretham,
Aye.
Modis Castillo,
Aye.
Carter,
Aye. And thank you very much. That motion passes again as corrected. And that is the end of the items on our agenda for your vote. We are now moving to a workshop, and it is very exciting to have the opportunity to hear from the county manager and strategic team in this committee of the whole meeting, which I will chair. We have noticed that we have guests on our screen. I apologize for not having welcomed them in advance. I will turn this over to the county manager and team to introduce the workshop and to bring our guest in. County manager, and thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I'll do a brief introduction while a couple of folks join us around the table. We have Alex Kutza here today, Director of Finance, and our Policy and Planning Director, Elizabeth Tolzman. They're going to be the leads in the conversation today, along with our visitors on the screen. I'll make sure that they have an opportunity. How about this? I'll pause for just a second and give them a moment to introduce themselves, and then I'll finish the rest of my introduction.
Hi, I'm Dave Keene. Thank you very much for having us this morning. I'm the principal of Keene Independent Research.
Hi, my name is Blanca Montero. I'm a senior consultant at Keene Independent.
I'm Joseph Broad. I'm a consultant at Keene Independent.
My name is Keith Weiner. I'm a partner in the law firm Holland and Knight. Good morning.
Thanks to all of you for being here. Two topics today, Madam Chair, during the Strategic Team Committee of the Whole. We've talked a lot over the last number of years as a board on a continued evolution around contracting, the tools available in contracting to ensure inclusivity and diversity among our spend and access, recognizing this is a tool towards prosperity and well-being across our community. And there are a various number of avenues to be exploring as we have those discussions. One is to be community-minded in the way we do this work and approach our work. Examples such as the Dale Street Bridge project are one example of that work from day one that have been there since the beginning. But another key area relates to the legal and statutory tools both available to the county and potentially not yet unlocked by Ramsey County as we look forward. And part of today's conversation will focus on those tools and where we need to go and next and how to do so. So I thank everyone from Keene for being here as a part of that today. In addition to that work, we'll also take a few moments to talk more broadly about the 2020 strategic plan. This was one of those items that was discussed back at your board workshop in January, and then the world changed very quickly. And our focus has never left the strategic plan, is what I hope you see today, that we've continued to try to find ways to move that work along throughout this year. But there were some level of revised timelines and the need to ensure that the first and foremost in our response has been COVID-19. The Director of Policy and Planning has worked over the last few months to finalize a 12-month strategic plan update that will be with you today. It should not be new surprises, but is a good moment to do a check-in in that space. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to our Director of Finance, Alex Kutza, who will get us going next. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to go to the Policy Director, Elizabeth Tolsman, who will get us going next.
And good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. It's great to be with you this morning, and I'm pleased to co-present this with our Chief Financial Officer. Just to give you a little bit of background and context, we actually started this work with our former CFO, Lee Merkins, earlier this year. And it's really about the work of our purchasing and contract action teams. As you may know, we created action teams across the county to ensure that we're working within our service teams and also across service teams to advance key goals and initiatives that relates to our strategic priorities. This one in particular, the PCAT team, is what they're called. It's really about how we increase and diversify use of or working with small businesses, particularly minority and women-owned businesses within the county, and also advancing our work on contracting and vendor workforce inclusion. These teams met earlier this year and created an action plan before the pandemic hit. And with our new CFO, we have reinvigorated their teams in the past 30 days. During this time, we reached out to Keene Consulting. They're a national research firm, and they have significant expertise in this area. We learned real quick that this is a complicated nature of work, especially since there's several programs, federal, state, and local programs. And absent a disparity study that Ramsey County does not have, we wanted to know what we can do and what we cannot do and how we can enhance our work and what we could possibly implement if we did have a disparity study. We did present this to our purchasing and contract governance team last week and obtained their feedback, and we have various levels of expertise within the county in this work as well, and want to acknowledge and recognize that, but also know that we needed some ground setting to lay this foundation. Should we know that Keene Independent, they conducted the 2017 disparity studies for the state of Minnesota, city of Minneapolis, city of St. Paul, as well as Hennepin County. And we're pleased to have one of their staff, Blanca, she's a resident of St. Paul and of Ramsey County as well. And so with that, I think I'll just hand it over to Keene, absent any additional comments from our CFO, seeing none. I'll hand it over to Mr. David Keene, and we can start the presentation.
Well, thank you very much for making time for us today. We have a PowerPoint presentation for you, and we're going to pretty much race through this so we have as much time as possible for you to ask us questions. And again, we've been working closely with Ramsey County staff throughout. So I am I think the staff is going to put the presentation up. There we go. As mentioned in the introduction, we have quite a bit of experience with equity programs and procurement across the country. I personally worked with Ramsey County and led the disparity study for Ramsey County about 25 years ago. So if any of you were around for that, nice to see you again. Unfortunately, you can't base a minority business program on my work from 25 years ago. So we're going to go over our assessment of where you are right now and what you can do, and then how you can prepare if you seek to do more, and give you some of those reasons why. So let's go to our study topics. We wanted to briefly, Blanca Montero is going to briefly go over what we did. Keith Weiner and I will talk about our preliminary conclusions. We're developing a report for you to be able to see this in more detail, and that's still in review. So what are our preliminary conclusions? What are our preliminary recommendations about what you can do now, what you can be moving forward that you might be able to do later, and what would be the series of steps that you might consider, and then open this up for questions, probably at the pleasure of the chair. You can decide whether we kind of break in each one of these topics or wait to the end. So moving on to the next slide, I think Blanca is going to tell you exactly what we did.
Thank you again for making the time, and a proud resident of Highland Park. So thank you. What we did, first of all, we reviewed federal and state statutes related to SBE, Small Business Enterprise, and Disadvantaged Business Enterprise programs, and how do they relate to Ramsey County. So we first do a big overview how those programs apply to our county now. also, we analyze how small business programs apply to other local governments. So how these equity programs in contracting apply in other local governments, for example, City of St. Paul or the City of Minneapolis, that they have applied these programs for a long time now. We also review what's the county doing now to improve equity in contracting. We review some information that it's online, is public available, and review that information. Next, what we did was to try to explain why local and state governments need to have a disparity study, how a disparity study is conducted, what are the different phases and progress for that, and finally, we identify some options or recommendations for the county. Dave?
This is Chair Carter. I am going to, with no hands up at this time, just allow that we continue through the preliminary conclusions. There may be questions at that time, but I think that the first two flow well together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Keith and I are going to share presenting this slide. The first key point, and it gets confusing with equity programs. Equity programs follow the money. So if you get state or federal money, and it depends on what type of money for which types of contracts, you're required as a condition of getting that money to implement those state or federal programs. The program that people are probably most familiar with is the federal DBE program. DBE is Disadvantaged Business Enterprise. This program's been around since the early 1980s and had some predecessors before that. And you get certified under the federal rules as a disadvantaged business enterprise. Most DBEs are minority women-owned firms. And as a condition of getting US DOT money for transportation projects, which often flows through MnDOT, you must implement the federal DBE program. So you'll have some street and road projects with DBE goals on them. Those are county projects, but because it's US DOT money, you're required to have the DBE program on it. Minnesota DOT sets the parameters of that program and reports back on its own contracts and all of the subrecipients, such as counties and cities throughout the state of Minnesota that use FHWA, FTA, or other monies that flow through MnDOT. They will report back to FHWA, FTA, and the different modes at US DOT. So you usually don't directly receive that money. MnDOT sets the requirements for the county to implement those. And the fact that you get that money and you implement the federal DBE program is very specific to those contracts. And it doesn't mean that you can apply the DBE program to locally funded contracts, or say you had a street project that had no federal funds in it, the DBE program, it would be improper for you to apply it. There are similar rules for getting HUD funds, for EPA funds. And then in the state of Minnesota, which operates an equity program that's race and gender conscious, there's a provision in their law that requires recipients for a certain construction of funds. If you have a state-funded construction contract, which may not be very often, there's a program for the state that you operate based on those state requirements. So very clearly, if there's requirements that come from the state or the federal government to the county, so you get the money and there's requirements for an equity program that come along with that, you must, as a condition of getting that money, operate those programs in accordance to those rules, but not operate them for anything else. Keith, I'm going to hand point number 2 to you.
So the bullet point shows that the United States Supreme Court in 1989 established a landmark case in this area from a legal perspective, in which the court held that race or ethnic-based programs in connection with award of contracts by a local government are prohibited unless the local government has a strong, firm basis and evidence of specific identified discrimination in their contracting in their marketplace that establishes or meets the strict scrutiny standard. The strict scrutiny standard is a standard under the Equal Protection Clause of the United States Constitution. It's the most stringent, highest burden for a local government in terms of from a legal requirements to establish the need to have a program. So there's two prongs. The first prong is that the local government establish it as a compelling governmental interest that's based on evidence of identified discrimination, again, in your market. And that the second prong is, even if you establish that you have a compelling governmental interest to have a race or ethnic-based program, that the program is narrowly tailored to achieve that specific identified discrimination in terms of the alleviation or remedying that discrimination in your market. So as we indicate here, local governments perform disparity studies, which have been recognized by the United States Supreme Court and all the decisions since that 1989 decision as a method to determine if a minority or women business enterprise program is needed in your jurisdiction and it satisfies the legal standards applicable. Dave?
Thank you. The next key point is that...
and as just, Mr. Keene, as you present, we're re-logging in. So just keep going. We'll get the PowerPoint back up on the screen.
Good. I'm not qualified to talk about the pie chart. So that would be a good test to see if I could pull that off. But I think this morning I'll pass. Our third point here is that just to know that the joint disparity study took place. It was in 2017, and the state of Minnesota, city of Minneapolis, city of St. Paul, others. There are 9 total participants. Most of those are operating race and gender conscious programs based on the results of those disparity studies. The disparity studies are important for you all because it showed that there was not a level playing field for minority and women-owned firms in the Twin Cities marketplace. We looked at Twin Cities specifically and the state overall. So it showed evidence of discrimination against minority and women-owned firms and people of color and women, even at the stage of forming businesses. We found disparities in the rates of business ownership. But those disparity studies also looked at their own contracts. It wasn't just solely on the marketplace. And that's a key thing about disparity studies is they look at both. So you share a marketplace with the city of St. Paul and others in the Twin Cities that we examined in that disparity study that showed evidence of discrimination. However, we did not in those studies look at Ramsey County contracts. And we had an analysis for the city of St. Paul, for example, specific to their own contracts, especially when they were not applying a race conscious program, to see if their other programs were working or if they needed to continue or expand their race and gender conscious program like an MBE or WBE, or in the case of St. Paul, it's called the VOP program. So that's an important difference between, say, the city of St. Paul situation and having a recent disparity study and Ramsey County situation. Because that they have a disparity study, they can have a sound basis legally to move forward with race-conscious programs, depending on the results of their individual studies. And stronger programs lead to better results. So we found that for equity and contracting, St. Paul and Minneapolis when they were applying programs, were doing about twice as well as Ramsey County with your small business enterprise program, which is something I should have mentioned at the beginning. It's not like Ramsey County isn't trying to attack this problem. You have a limited set of tools, and because you have a limited set of tools that are focused only on small business programs for your locally funded contracts, your outcomes are not as strong as those that have minority women business programs like the city of St. Paul and Minneapolis. So this is our best guess right now with imperfect information of what your minority business and women business participation is. And Joe Broad on our team, who's in the session, calculated that to be about 2 to 5% Ramsey County participation, and that's with your programs in place. We get 16 to 23% for Minneapolis and St. Paul for minority women business participation when they have their programs in place. So it's quite a bit of difference. Chair, if you would like us to stop with here or keep going into the recommendations.
Thank you very much. I have no, yes, I do have a hand up, and I have a question following Commissioner Mary Jo McGuire. Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for this. Just a sort of a clarifying question for me. If you've done a study in St. Paul, is any of that data relevant, translatable to us, or is it really about the St. Paul programs? St. Paul is half of our county. I was just wondering if that information is anything we can use, or is it specific to St. Paul and their programs, which would be different than Ramsey County's programs in St. Paul? If you could just talk a little bit about that intersection.
Sure. Let me start, and then Keith can clean up any messes that I make along the way. We have quite a bit of information on the local marketplace, and you share that marketplace, is our understanding, with the city of St. Paul. And it's not limited to Ramsey County. You buy from businesses throughout the Twin Cities, as do the city of Minneapolis and the city of St. Paul, or Ramsey County was a participant in the joint study. So the evidence that we found for the Twin Cities marketplace is very relevant to you. And we also have data on the availability of businesses who are ready, willing, and able to work with local governments, including Ramsey County. So that information is very relevant. What we don't have is a thorough analysis, and that was not part of our current engagement with Ramsey County. We don't have a thorough analysis and a disparity analysis that compares your utilization of minority women-owned firms with the availability specific to county contracts. Your mix of work is different than the city of St. Paul. We can't just say, oh, well, availability for St. Paul is this, because you have different types of contracts. And that analysis has not been performed, and so you would be on a weak basis to move forward without that specific information. One of the key reasons is it's important to know what's working and what isn't working about your current programs before you would go to stronger programs. That's one of the requirements under the law, that you narrowly tailor any remedy that you have to the specific problem that you've identified. Without that specificity, you would be subject to legal challenge and would not have those disparity results for Ramsey County specifically. So you have about a half a disparity study already done for you by these other entities. It's just the other half is critical.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And it sort of alongside that question. So I assume you haven't done it in any of our other cities in Ramsey County, that none of the other cities have asked for any of these kinds of studies. I'm assuming that's the case. But if it were, I'm sure you'd be telling us.
That is correct.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Commissioner Reinhardt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I do see, obviously, there is a compelling reason that we need to get that data. I guess I didn't fully understand until this presentation that I knew of the must side of the contracts and the funds that come through the state or the federal government in certain cases. I didn't realize it was a must or can. I was making a false assumption that we could choose to have requirements in any of our purchasing that would give preference to, not require, but give preference to DBEs. And it sounds like that is not the case, that we have to have a compelling reason to have that in place, and we do, but right now it sounds like what we need is the data to back that up. I think that I remember when this study was being done, and we did not have the same work done for Ramsey County, and I think part of that, if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, County Manager, but I believe the fact that we were doing the racial equity and community engagement response team, because we were doing that, we wanted to make sure that we had things in line, because we've been in a process of re-evaluating and making changes to our procurement system to allow for more small business participation. And so I think the timing is right to make sure that we move forward with that. But honestly, as I said, I was surprised. I didn't realize it was a must and or can. And that really does heighten the need to move forward.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Reinhardt, I'll just say to that point, it's that evolutionary path that you described. And as we have opened up in the work in areas like the Racial Equity and Community Engagement Response Team and done more focused work, we also see the areas where we fall short without more available legal tools. And today is really that next step in the recognition that there are additional tools required to achieve the vision as has been laid out, both by the organization and the community in which we partner, and that is what has led to today's conversation and projected steps forward.
It's an exciting time to be moving forward. Thank you.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, if I could just ask the presenters, as you're speaking about acronyms, if you could just spell it out. So, for example, MBE stands for Minority Business Enterprise, and WBE stands for Women Business Enterprise.
Thank you very much. The question that I would have is regarding our ability to create specific, strict scrutiny programs that would address specific needs. The two commissioners before me have followed the direction of questions that I had before, but let me just ask if you would give an example, please, of a type of program tailored to meet a specific need, such as those that are happening in Minneapolis or St. Paul or Hennepin County or others, the vendor outreach program, for example. Could you give us a statement, not necessarily that one, but of a strict need design?
Madam Chair.
That question.
I apologize, Madam Chair. There was a delay. To that question, I think in the 5 recommendations about to be made, this example comes up as a part of them. And so my ask would be maybe we could walk through the 5 recommendations, and that specific question you just asked be specifically addressed by the team as a part of that response. And if need be, I have that question written down that we could revisit if you still don't feel like you get the answer.
That is good, and thank you. We'll move forward.
Thank you.
Okay, well, moving into the recommendations, we have a few slides to go over here. If you want to advance the slides. Okay, we have, first of all, I mentioned previously that the county is already making efforts to reach out to diverse businesses to assist as part of just economic development efforts and equity efforts in the county. And you are making some strides to increase the readiness of diverse firms to do business with the county. And that is something that is allowable because you're not picking and choosing. Those are diverse businesses among small businesses in general that you are assisting through a loan program, through training programs, and other efforts. And part of the payoff of that is you're building a diverse vendor base to be able to do business with the county. And that is one of the so-called neutral measures that you're doing now. one of our recommendations is to continue that and expand that the best you can. Certainly in COVID-19, there's national evidence that minority businesses, especially African-American owned businesses, have been hit particularly hard by the pandemic in terms of the economic downturn in access to capital, because many of the businesses that were in business before the pandemic were poorly capitalized. And that's especially true for African-American owned firms nationally, that when you had hits on cash flow, that hurt the most vulnerable businesses first. And you've had more businesses close proportionally that are African-American owned than you've had of other groups. In general, minority owned businesses have been particularly hurt. So the need for helping businesses outside of your procurement process is there even more than when we started this project at the beginning of the year. The second point is, what can you do with your current equity program for locally funded contracts? And you have a small business enterprise program now. The first thing that we would suggest you entertain is to go ahead and set aspirational goals for small business enterprise, minority business enterprise, and women business enterprise participation. If these are overall aspirational goals that are not requirements, they're not quotas, you're not saying that any prime contractor or any department within the county has to meet those goals, but you set a standard for what you expect the county to aspirationally achieve. The question about what information is in the disparity study that you can use now, we have availability information that would, although not to the extent that we could refine it if we had done a full disparity study for you all, because we've used that information for some of the other entities, such as the city of Minneapolis. But you get a general sense of what availability is in the market. Well more than a third of the businesses in the Twin Cities available for public sector work are minority women-owned firms. It is possible to set those overall aspirational goals for minority business and women business participation, which makes a statement to the community that the county is serious about this. The CERT program is a certification program that the city of St. Paul operates, and you were one of the founding members of, along with other local governments in the Twin Cities. We're recommending that that program works, and as long as it continues to work, that you participate in it, because it gives you a database of firms that are small business certified, that may also be minority women owned, and builds the vendor base for the county. You have a ready list of firms. The CERT certification is not perfect, and there is some debate about whether there are even better certification approaches, but it's what you have right now, and I think you can continue to improve it along with your partners in the CERT program. For many years, the county prepared participation reports on an annual basis and made those reports to the commission, showing minority and women business participation along with small business enterprise participation. A few years ago, the county went to a different approach, which is the open data portal, where anybody who's interested could run their own reports, which is very handy for us as we were doing our research. Open data portal, you ought to be commended on that, because that's full transparency. Anybody can see for themselves what the participation is if they're pretty good at Excel and running these types of reports, which not everybody is. So we're recommending that you keep the open data portal, but you bring the annual reports back and make it easier for the public and for commissioners, leadership of the county, to see where you stand for minority women business participation. So that's 2C in our slide here. And to get good information, you'll need to require primes to provide information about each subcontract. You have the authority to do that now, but that sometimes gets lost in the shuffle as project managers are trying to effectively manage their projects. So making that a priority and being able to report not only certified minority women business participation or small business participation as subcontractors, but all subcontracts, because you only get the full picture if you have all of the information. Point E is to look at and continue to look at any restrictive procurement procedures. If you imagine that minority and women-owned firms, on average, not always, but on average, are less capitalized, have more cash flow issues than other firms, how quickly you pay firms is going to be an issue. If you require firms to have a lot of money in the bank to be able to get a bond on a project, even a small project, that's another possible barrier. Eliminating any catch-22s of you have to have worked with the county already to get work in the future with the county is another restrictive procurement procedure that is unintended but may still be in there. And just how you do evaluations of overweighting the past experience with the county so you're not letting anybody new in. So that is something that the staff is very aware of and has been working on, and continuing to do that is one of our recommendations. 2F, and sorry this is a long list, but there is plenty for you all to do and continue to do. But when you're looking at your small contracts in particular and looking at your vendor list, you need to recruit firms in advance of those procurement opportunities to know about work with the county, how to do business with the county, and not wait for that individual procurement. So part of the county's opportunity is to go out and beat the bushes for local firms that are small businesses and may also be minority and women-owned businesses that are available for your future contracts, and be looking at your types of spending and where it best matches up to those diverse firms. We found in our disparity studies for other local governments in the Twin Cities that there's a lot of confusion among small businesses about how to do public sector work, even to find out about public sector work. And these firms almost feel like they're shut out when in fact they aren't. A better way to approach this is you're not shut out, but you haven't been asked. So go ask, go recruit these businesses that are in the county that can certainly provide the types of goods and services, especially at the small level that the county procures, and request that they bid and ask them to get it certified through CERT. And then point G is you have the ability through a new state law to have informal procurements on purchases up to $250,000. You do not have to publicly advertise up to $250,000. That is a special provision for counties, and you all have taken advantage of that in terms of a process. We've analyzed the results of your process, and we found that it has had very little impact on the participation of certified businesses at the top end of that scale. It still goes to larger businesses and non-certified companies. And so that's a missed opportunity that you now have the authority to do. And we can talk about the specifics of that more, but one of the reasons you have not had success with that is perhaps you've not gotten the bids because you haven't done the front end work or help those businesses understand that there are opportunities at the county. Point H, and this is available to you, it appears under state law, and the city of St. Paul, which the same state law applies to them as applies to you, has taken advantage of what's called a price or evaluation preference. And this is again on small purchases where a CERT certified company, they might be MBE or they might be a white male owned small business. If they are CERT certified and they have a bid of $100,000 on a small purchase, and a large company has a bid of $96,000 on a small purchase, if you had a 5% price evaluation preference in place for CERT certified businesses, you could give that award, that bid, to the CERT certified firm. So this has two effects. One is you actually change the award from a large business to a small, perhaps diverse business. The other is, as you're going out and recruiting companies to do business with the county, being able to talk about this program and say, okay, we're giving you a competitive edge as you compete for this work up to $250,000. that is a good selling tool for them to invest the time to figure out how to do business with the county, put the time into putting a bid together and then competing for that work. And you don't need to have 20 bids. You could have 3 bids up to that $250,000. That very closely mirrors our recommendations to other, like the city of St. Paul and other local governments in the Twin Cities from the disparity study is to get firms involved, diverse firms involved as a prime or as a direct vendor to sell goods and services to the jurisdiction. The small purchases is where to start. We've analyzed the low end of your small purchases, and we do have diverse spending. At the top end, up to the $250,000 level, you don't. And so this is an untapped tool that you have. And then finally, you have an SBE contract goals program. And that is a typical race conscious measure if it's an MBE contract goals program. So the difference between what you can do now and what you would be able to do with a full disparity study is turn your SBE program into an MBE contract goals program. But with the SBE contract goals program, there are some front-end requirements for a contractor to either meet the SBE goal, the percentage goal set for that contract, or show good faith efforts to do so. You do not have the teeth in that program that you might want. You may want to consider penalties for firms that say, oh, I'm going to include these small businesses or diverse businesses at the front end, and then they never notify those subcontractors and there's no participation in the contract. Right now, you need more teeth to be able to penalize those firms and hold the primes accountable. We're not saying that we know this to be a problem for Ramsey County. We do know that it's a problem elsewhere within the Twin Cities for similar programs.
Thank you.
We have more recommendations to come, but should we pause here and answer any questions?
I think so. Yes, thank you very much. I'd like to pull in Commissioner McDonough.
Thanks, Chair Carter. I've got a number of questions and or comments. The first one is probably more of a comment, but certainly I'd be interested to hear. I've actually participated in a couple of conversations, one through WIB that we did with a number of employers, and then one through the Center for Economic Inclusion and some work that we're doing there. And so many times we don't disaggregate our data. So especially when it comes to minority and women-owned businesses, or even in the greater category of small businesses, we're not disaggregating it enough. And so we'll celebrate some good numbers, but the fact is, and you identified it early on, Black-owned businesses in particular really are not getting the benefit of this work. But a lot of times, especially when it minority and women-owned businesses, and we certainly want to support the women-owned businesses, but a lot of times the success and the improvement in numbers we've seen is focused almost totally on white women-owned businesses and very little on minority businesses. So I would encourage us to make sure and I appreciate the recommendation to actually go back to the actual report rather than just letting people pull their own data through the open data portal. But for us to start our whole process here as we're moving forward on these recommendations to really disaggregate within these areas, so we really have a good sense, because there'll be continuing to be gaps in particular areas over other areas, and not for us to have this false sense that we're doing really good work and we're still leaving large parts of the community behind. And I would pause just if you had some comments on that.
We do. So one of the details that we didn't discuss about a disparity study is the evidence needs to be specific to minority group. So you might have disparities for African American owned firms, but you might not have them for Asian American owned firms. Right. We're doing a study right now for another client where that is the result. And so the other disaggregation that's important is by industry. because there are certain industries that are even tougher for minority and women-owned firms to get work from the public sector than others. And you might be looking good in one industry, one type of contracting, and terrible in another. And if you look at the overall results, that can mask that. So your point is very well taken. Our recommendation would be that when you report this, you're reporting by minority group, and then you separate out white women-owned firms from minority-owned firms, and that you do that by industry. So you're looking at what's the success in construction, in professional services, in goods, in other services. So you don't mask any deficiencies, and you know where you're doing best. And perhaps you can expand what you might be doing in some areas from another. The city of Minneapolis takes this so far as to set overall aspirational goals by department and track their success by department. We don't know that you're there yet, but that is something that you could consider for the future.
Good. Yeah, it's interesting. In the conversation we had at the Workforce Investment Board, it was actually a woman, Asian-owned business, a woman who owns Asian woman who owns a business who brought this issue up, and she actually was suggesting that she actually does quite well compared to African American businesses, but not well when she just is compared with women-owned businesses, because typically white women-owned businesses dominate that. So I appreciate that. Another issue that has come up as I've had these conversations in the community, especially with larger respondents to contracts, and then we're looking at them to, report on the use of their subs and or suppliers. A lot of times they're using minority or even women-owned business or small businesses that they contract with in other states where they've got relationships, and it's not helping or benefiting our local businesses. And I don't know if that's a big issue or not a big issue, but that has come up a couple of times where, again, we're celebrating numbers, but it might be a California minority-owned business that is actually contributing to those numbers and not local or Minnesota or even a Ramsey County business. And so I don't know if you bumped up against that, especially working with larger contract groups when we're looking at their subs and suppliers.
I might kick this to Blanca, because I'm going to ask about what firms can get certified through CERT. What's the geographic area? And I simply don't recall. But that is another way that you can, if your part of your data source is CERT certified businesses, and this gets into the weeds a little bit too, because you can choose to look at all minority women-owned firms, whether or not they're CERT certified, which would include very large businesses that might be minority and women-owned. And there are those businesses that exist in the Twin Cities. You probably know of them. Should you also just look at CERT certified businesses, which are local businesses? Blanca, do you recall if that is Twin Cities, and does it go into Wisconsin?
Yes, it goes into Wisconsin. It's the MSA area. So it's only businesses that are located in the Twin Cities MSA area, the metropolitan statistical area. Yeah.
So that would be, if you look at minority and women-owned businesses overall, which might be a good thing to do, and that's how we do this in a disparity study, it might also make sense to have a report on CERT certified firms, which will focus solely on local small minority and women-owned firms that are certified.
Yeah. I think that's going to be really helpful, because we're still going to have a lot, and then, this might actually be an issue that comes farther down the road, because we're still going to have a lot of large contracts that we initiate, but we're going to be looking to those large contracts to be partners in us and helping support this, whether it's the utilization of subs or suppliers and that type of effort. And I know there's some work going on through Greater MSP and Itasca regionally here to get, businesses to look at that. So that might be farther down the road. And then one of the other questions I have, it kind of comes down to this 5% valuation. And I wasn't aware of that. I'm glad to hear that. But I know we had done a lot of work or a lot of work went into, because in Minnesota we have this lowest responsible bidder, which we were bumping up against, and it was causing us a problem, especially in government here. And we got some work done where we could actually take a look at best valued and awarding contracts based on best value. And how does that play into what you're putting a value on to be able to award contracts, because it's a value of us in awarding that contract and making sure that we're supporting minority, women, small businesses is one of our values versus weighing that with lowest responsible bidder type requirements that we have in Minnesota.
So let me talk about the recommendation, which does not pertain to best value. This would be for the parts in your procurement code, in the state code, that allows you to have to not have to do public advertising and only get a certain number of bids up to a certain dollar value. It used to be 175,000, and the state has adopted a law that counties can use to increase that flexibility up to 250,000 as long as you are soliciting certified small businesses or disadvantaged businesses in those procurements. So this is really not big enough to be in the best value arena. This would be very small construction contracts, but bread and butter goods and services contracts that you might see every day at the county. On best value, I am not aware, but maybe others are, of other local governments or the state that are using a preference along with the best value to be able to encourage diverse businesses.
David? And Madam Chair and David, if I could jump in on the best value piece, because there's been some conversation occurring about that in addition to this work happening at the same time. And what I would say to Commissioner McDonough's comment right now, and one of the pieces that has been something that we need to continue to work through, is that in the arena outside, so the horizontal versus vertical construction arena has mattered greatly to the use of best value, even by local governments with the authority in Minnesota. And so as I've talked more with our public works director, and Ted has talked about the conversations that have gone on, best value still just has not been used on the horizontal construction side, which is a large segment of our spend. I do not say that today saying that we should not go further and continuing to push that boundary and engaging conversations with the Association of General Contractors and others to move it forward, to maybe move in that direction. But as of now, that's one of the things that we found has been a significant barrier as we spent time looking at this. And we need to think about moving forward.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I have one more question, then just kind of a closing comment on all the questions I asked, if I could. Yeah, thank you. So all this work's really focused in on the ownership of businesses and helping support minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, small businesses, and then digging deeper, and a lot of this came out, especially like when we did Central Corridor and some of the other large investments. It's about who they employ also, right? And where does that, how do we incorporate that into this to make sure that we're not, again, being successful in our numbers on women or minority-owned businesses, but not so successful on who actually works or is employed by those businesses, to ensure that we're generating and providing wealth building opportunities within our community for the people that live in our community.
So many local governments have workforce programs on their, especially their construction contracts. And the idea of, hey, it's local tax dollars. You'd like the crew on the project in your neighborhood to look like the community. It's your tax dollars. You expect that as a local citizen. That has many, and I'll let Keith comment on that, that has all of the same legal issues when you start to make race and gender preferences or requirements for awarding those contracts as on the workforce as you do in everything else we've talked about today. So we've actually done workforce disparity studies, Canadian Independent has. We've advised clients on how to attack these issues. And we know that there's discrimination. We've seen discrimination in the construction industry in particular, especially for African Americans and women in the Twin Cities, where you're not seeing entry into the trades. And some trades women are nearly shut out of based on our data, and very few African American workers, and very little advancement to supervisor, foreman level. So this is an issue. It was not part of the disparity study that we examined for the other Twin Cities entities in terms of programs, but we have data on this. We know that there's a problem. It was simply outside of the scope of the previous disparity study that we did for those entities. Keith, I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, I would just reiterate what Dave said, that the legal standard that I mentioned earlier is applicable in this regard too, whenever you're considering in determining an award of a contract, race or gender or ethnic ownership interest or employees for that matter in connection with workforce diversity. So you would need to have that kind of an analysis done to justify if you were going to include as a part of your solicitation what their workforce diversity was. Having said that, many jurisdictions now we see recently especially are focusing when they do disparity studies for contracting, workforce diversity is becoming an area in which they want also to study and analyze for the various reasons, Commissioner, that you've mentioned in connection with wanting to make sure that the community is participating as well in terms of the employee aspect.
Thank you. And then, Chair Carter, my final comments, I would not only encourage us to be aspirational and you know, moving forward on these recommendations and the goal setting, but to be very aggressive in us. I think, you know, even though we didn't participate early on in the study that was done with St. Paul, Minneapolis, Hennepin, and State, and the other jurisdictions, and we've done some work, certainly internally, and that's good. But we've got a really good opportunity here to really set the foundation for what we do based on what we're learning others have set their foundations at, right? And how far and how aggressive we can be. And then on the legal issues too, I think we need to continue to take a look at when we're bumping up against legal issues. You know, when is it appropriate for us to actually work with partners to help provide opportunities through legislation to help level the playing field? There's a lot of conversations about equity and racism and the institutional racism, and there's a lot of institutional racism built into our legislation and our statutes and our legal system. And as we bump up against that, we should be leading with partners to help take apart that institutional racism that's a part of our statutes at the state and or federal level. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner McDonough. And I believe in the course of your questions, I've also heard a response to what would be a strict scrutiny standard type of program. And that would be one that focuses on industry as well as population group to meet the needs of the particular market. I certainly can hear if you would need to address that in more detail, but I am satisfied hearing and understanding that. I have no further questions, and so we can move on. Turning it back to you.
Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. All right. So one of the issues that came up, and you are not our only client to ask this, is what about nonprofits? So nonprofits, by definition, are not businesses. They don't have owners, but they still have boards, leadership, and can you examine the diversity of those nonprofits as you are issuing county contracts? So there's things you can do and things you can't do, but long story short, you're in the same situation with not-for-profits as you are with businesses because you've not done a disparity study. And your disparity study ideally would look at the issue of nonprofits if that's something that you might be interested in examining in the future or having a program for in the future. But let's talk about what you can do. You can certainly increase your outreach to diverse nonprofits. You can collect information about the composition of boards and leadership. Sometimes asking the question helps to set the message that this is expected in the community, and you are one of the institutions that are focused on maybe some needed change. So collecting the information and shedding some light on boards and leadership is one of the things that you can do. You can track whether not-for-profits have diverse leadership and report that in your annual reports that we've recommended. And then typically the way, and we do a lot of not-for-profit work and help on procurement related not-for-profits. In our experience, when you're looking at a particular issue, the experience of a not-for-profit that has demonstrated track record in working with diverse communities, that may be the issue that you are trying to address. And you would certainly look at that experience for that not-for-profit. That might align with the diversity of their leadership and their board composition. So that is something that you do now and you can continue to do, is look at the ability and experience in providing the needed services as you make those contract selections like you would do with any other organization. Right now, you legally would not be on firm ground if you based any contract selection on the diversity of a nonprofit board. So we wanted to make that clear to you. That because you have not studied this, and this is the same strict scrutiny standard as a business equity program, that we wanted to caution you that use the tools that you have, and this is one that it looks like you do not have at the moment. Any questions here?
I don't think so, Commissioner McDonough. Do you have an?
I'm sorry. I did lower my hand, but I quick lowered it and raised it again. So quick question, because I think I heard two things here. You've done this study on minority-owned small business enterprises and women-owned businesses for us. But I thought I heard when I brought up the worker issue, we can do a study on that to help us set the stage for us to be able to do better in what our expectations are for people who have contracts and who and how they employ. And then I thought I just heard the same thing. We could do a study on but we need those studies as a basis to be able to make better selections, or I don't know what the right word is here, because maybe we can't make requirements, but can help us select who we're going to work with because we've done these studies. And are these studies needed then to help us actually make headway in working with businesses that employ and support the minorities within our community and or nonprofits, I guess is my question.
The short answer is there are things that you can do now, but being explicit in saying, okay, we're going to make requirements or give points for, say, an employer that has a diverse workforce or a not-for-profit that has a diverse board or leadership. That is a step that you do not have the basis to go to now without that research.
And then I'll just take it one step farther. If we did that research, we could actually potentially go that far to where we could actually give points then if we did the research that would actually validate that we've got these big gaps?
I'm going to kick this to Keith, and then I'll answer any other questions you have. But Keith, you want to answer that?
Complicated question. It's a very valid question, but it's complicated in the sense that when you're doing these studies, what's important is you're determining whether or not you have a basis to find that there's evidence of discrimination or disparities that are substantial in your jurisdiction involving your contracting, involving those contractors in your marketplace. So the first question of the first prong of the strict scrutiny standard is to determine whether or not you have that compelling interest to consider having a program. Then if you have that basis, if you have found substantial disparities with various groups in your marketplace for your contracting, then you can consider what options you have available to remedy that discrimination, which have to be narrowly tailored, which is a term of legal art, excuse me, in terms of how you remedy it. So you have to apply neutral measures. You have to apply various limitations on the type of program that you can develop, directed and targeted specifically to what the evidence shows in your market. So the short answer is you may be able to do what you're suggesting if you have done a study and it substantiates from a legal perspective your ability to do it, as long as you narrowly tailor that program to address the specific identified disparities in your market.
Thank you.
Commissioner Reinhardt.
Thank you. And that was the point that I was trying to make at the beginning, is that we need to have the actual research completed. It has to be targeted, or we are not allowed to make some of those changes, which I know we want to do. So that's the, can and must side of this. So it increases the necessity to make sure that we get those things in place so that we can move forward to the next step. At least that's what I'm hearing, because we cannot do it without that research behind it.
And it's important to indicate that the research and the findings and the study and analysis, of course, is subject to whatever the evidence shows, and whatever the evidence shows is related to the objective quantitative evidence and the qualitative anecdotal evidence for your specific contracting in your marketplace dealing with the county. And as Dave mentioned earlier in the discussion, that's really critical. So there's no preordained conclusion here, is what I want to say from a lawyer's perspective. You're looking at whether or not there is that discrimination and those disparities in your market, in those industries, and with those particular groups. And so you want to keep that open from the standpoint of what the research would be accomplishing.
Yes, and I appreciate that clarification, because it's not just doing the research, but what the research and the data shows as far as what we can do as far as next steps. But again, it comes back to that data being where we need to start so that we can start making some of those other changes.
Yes.
Thank you for the questions. I do have one more question from a commissioner. I just wanted to, before I forget, recognize that there are some things that we can do today that are focused on using the tools that we have and getting deeper in terms of what state statute allows us to do today that we perhaps have not yet begun to do. An example of that, of course, all of the recommendations under number 3 in the PowerPoint that you have that we've looked at so far are things that we can do. That would include, although we can't in this particular time frame utilize the lowest responsible bidder as tailored for industry or tailored for population group. We can, using the search vendor, we can do the price evaluation, for example, as something that could assist us to reach certain vendors, and of course to make the assumption that many of those vendors are vendors of color and women businesses, African Americans, such as we see in the study that has been done for the market that we are a part of, shows a difference between what's available and what is used. I think it's really, I want to stop on this just because we are certainly wanting to, given our focus and how we've used the tools that we have so far, move forward. I don't want to take the attention off prematurely of the things that we can do to move forward. And then also that place where we must ensure that we're off the merry-go-round, that we have the data that we need given the compelling evidence that already exists, though not tailored to us. We must move forward to get that kind of evidence that we need so that we can address the inequities and disparities. But I just wanted to make certain to earmark that these recommendations we have so far visited are things that we can do, that we can explore. And we need to choose from within this list and move forward on many, if not all. I'm going to move to Commissioner McGuire. I have two other hands still up, but I'm assuming those questions have been asked. Commissioner McGuire, I will look back. You're still on mute. Commissioner McGuire, you are still on mute.
I thought I took myself off. Did you hear anything I said? Oh, okay, no. Okay. I said all this talk about strict scrutiny and all of this legal language brings me back to my law school days, which were fun for me, actually. But as we do all of this, as we are going to be engaging in all of this research, and I support all of it. If we determine that we have met the strict scrutiny standard, and then we start implementing some of these things, is it up to us to do that, or how is that determined whether we've met this or not, so that we can implement some of these? Who makes that determination, or is it just going to be left up to a court case if someone challenges that we've met it or not? I'm just, if you could talk about that a little bit.
And Commissioner, now that I know you're an attorney, I'm going to let Keith answer that question.
And we've got another one in law school, so both Commissioner Fretham and I are appreciating this conversation.
Commissioner, your question in terms of who determines it ultimately, of course, it's a policy decision that you and your fellow commissioners will ultimately make based on the evidence that would be presented to you in connection with a study or analysis. So what the legal requirements are, the court decisions recognize these studies as providing the evidentiary basis for you as a governmental entity, local government, to make that decision on a policy basis. So here you have this evidence of whether or not there's a compelling interest in your jurisdiction to have a program that in any way provides preferences for race or ethnic or gender based ownership in terms of your businesses contracting. Once you have that evidentiary basis presented to you, if it does show that there's substantial disparities in connection with meeting the legal standard, which would be, as the study would show to you, the evidence for that on a quantitative side and a qualitative evidentiary basis. Then you decide as a board the policy of what action you will take in connection with achieving, remedying, or alleviating those disparities that are shown. So what that means is you would decide on a program in terms of achieving, remedying discrimination or disparities in your market based on the evidence. So what most jurisdictions do, and we've done many of these throughout the country, is they take that evidentiary basis and they, based on the findings of the study, they then decide a program that they're going to adopt using that evidentiary findings to target their program and their market as to what they're going to do in connection with having a minority or women-owned business program and how they're going to implement that program. So many jurisdictions throughout the country, including the ones that Dave has mentioned in your market, based on the study that we did within the state of Minnesota, which have done exactly what you're discussing. They've taken that evidence and they made decisions either on the statewide level by the state governmental entities or with the other jurisdictions that were involved in that study to adopt programs locally to rectify or remedy what their findings were for their particular jurisdiction. Short answer, ultimately, it's up to you what policies and programs that you decide based on all that evidence, and of course, in consultation with your county attorney and your other agencies about what will work best for your jurisdiction on a practical side as well as on the legal side.
Thank you. And if we decide wrong, then the courts, then someone will take us to court and and then we go it that way. But otherwise, it's up to us. Yeah, I just was confirming that would be the case. That's great. I have.
Unfortunately, sorry, I interrupted you. I was going to say, unfortunately, it is a possibility that you would have a challenge to a program. It has happened in Minnesota in one case many years ago involving the Minnesota Department of Transportation, which if you're interested in, or you can forward that to your county attorney and you can review it, which analyzed and upheld the validity of the state of Minnesota program following the federal program. That case involved the federal disadvantaged business program where Minnesota DOT was implementing the federal program involving federal dollars. And the court in the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, which as you know is controlling in Minnesota, upheld the validity of the state government's implementation of that program. So it does happen, but hasn't happened often in Minnesota, fortunately.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And I just have one other clarifying question on where I'm in Section 3E, do not base contract selection on diversity of nonprofit boards. Is that saying you're recommending we shouldn't do that, or we're not doing that? Are you saying, I just want to make sure I'm reading that correctly. You're recommending we not do that? We probably can't do that until we have this evidence, this evidentiary basis. But is that what, am I understanding that correctly? Or we could do it if we had once we have these studies?
I think you stated that correctly. With the information that you have now, that would not be advisable.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that, Madam Chair.
And thank you. Go ahead.
Commissioner, may I just make one quick addition to what we've been discussing? It gets a little bit too legalistic. I just want to mention it so you're aware of it, especially because Commissioner McGuire is an attorney. And that is, we've been talking about the strict scrutiny standard. That applies to race or ethnic-based preferential programs. But your jurisdiction in your state and in your circuit, the 8th Circuit, along with many other circuits throughout the United States, have adopted a less burdensome standard called intermediate scrutiny for gender-conscious programs. So it's a lower threshold than strict scrutiny. It's still a high burden, and it still requires this type of studies that we've been talking about. But the courts have recognized this different level of scrutiny called intermediate when it comes to a program that's based on gender elements or gender preferences. I just want to mention that. I can get more into it if you want. I think Dave would kick me if he could, if I do, but I'll leave it there for the moment.
I appreciate that distinction. It's always fascinating to me, those little distinctions. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. And we don't need to go into it anymore, but thank you.
It's especially topical given the recent death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was really instrumental in establishing that standard in the Supreme Court cases that that she was involved with. Anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
It is very interesting, and we could hear more about it, but would welcome follow-up information. Thank you. I do have another hand up, Commissioner Reinhardt.
Thank you. Again, I know that we've been talking about what we can and cannot or must not do. And I think really what it comes down to is what was just stated, and that is practical versus legal. Yes, there are many things on this list that we can do, but we need to have the data. And so I wanted to make sure that I wasn't implying that we cannot or will not move forward with these things, but it is very clear from a legal standpoint that we need the research to back it up, or we're on shaky ground. So I'm excited to move forward with that so that we can make sure that what we're doing is in compliance and meets that strict or intermediate scrutiny standard that we need to do. Thank you.
And we are going to move on. I just, given that last comment, it must say that on page or on recommendations under number 3, I just want to clarify that everything that is under recommendation number 3, item 1, item 2, and the alphabetics underneath it, and item 3, which is establishing policies that would encourage participation of diverse nonprofits, albeit the limitations in the alphabetics underneath it need to be abided by. But all of those recommendations are things that you are recommending we do. I just need to stop on that before we move beyond that page and hear that definitive response.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you very much, and we are prepared to move on.
Tony?
Commissioner McDonough, I see your hand now.
Yeah, you know, it might be a good time to hear from Ryan about those recommendations and his thoughts, because I think they're all solid recommendations. You just clarified with the consultants that those are what they're recommending. I'd like to hear from Ryan. Does he see barriers or issues with any of us following through on any of those recommendations?
Thank you. Call on County Manager O'Connor.
Madam Chair, Commissioner McDonough, and members, thank you for that question. I appreciate it. We haven't gotten to this part yet, but I'll lay out my whole hand right now. I think as we go forward and the state gets to its next disparity study, that there's going to be a need for Ramsey County to be a part of it. I do not think there's any world where your aspirations and what our collective aspirations want to do here will align in a way where we will come back to you and say, we're doing so well, we won't be a part of that. I have personally been a part of conversations with the state under the current partners who have been a part of that joint disparity work. I appreciate them having invited us in, even though we were not a part of the last working group study, and we've worked from the commissioner level on down through that work. And so I just want to acknowledge that as one piece to this that we haven't even gotten to. In terms of all the other recommendations, my ask would be this, that we go back and we want to begin to really now move the work. I mean, this is a big step in untangling what has been done, hasn't been done, aspirations, and bringing this forward today to show you we want to take a methodical and meaningful approach. And by methodical, I do not mean slow. I mean exhaustive in our approach and taking advantage of every opportunity to do better in this space. And I think it can be hard sometimes for organizations to want to lay out all the places where we need to do better. Today's goal was to do that with you as clearly as possible, clear-eyed, and hear from commissioners what we hoped would be a positive reception. And I would just say that's what we've heard today. So our goal now will be to move back. Director Tolzman and Director Kutza will work across the governance action team related to procurement and contracting to bring this work back, to talk about what are the tools we can begin to move immediately, what are the pieces that need some runway, and how do we advance that forward together. And I look forward to sharing more with you, but full steam ahead from my perspective without exception.
And then, Madam Chair, if I could just make a quick comment on that, and Ryan, thank you for that. And I just want to say this up front because sometimes we get caught later on but we've got 2 other elected officials in this county, and to make sure we're bringing those parts of our organization along with us as we move forward on this, and not trying to have them catch up or force or push them to catch up to us later on.
Thank you very much, Commissioner McDonough. And County Manager, were you going to respond in that regard?
Madam Chair, Commissioner McDonough, thank you for the reminder. And just one piece of, we will make sure they are a part of this work, because I believe, if consistent with conversations in the past, we don't want to have a bifurcated approach to procurement contracting across different areas of what ends up being one Ramsey County.
Great appreciation. So without further question up, I will ask that we go back to the presentation. We're ready for your final pieces here. Thank you.
Good. So this slide talks about the must. When you get federal funds and you must implement programs, just a reminder to the county that this is not only a requirement, but to take full advantage of this requirement as required by the state under the state small business program for state-funded construction contracts of $100,000 or more. And that's different than the money that you might get through MnDOT for that might be federally funded. But as you have those requirements, make sure you are eager to use them because it benefits diverse businesses within your community. And then the same thing as you get federal money that has federal requirements along with it. As a condition of getting those funds, you pay attention to that and don't miss opportunities to follow those requirements. So that's pretty basic. We do work with clients where they get some of this money and they don't fully execute those programs and they miss those opportunities. So just a reminder for you all to know where those lines are and where those requirements are, and don't miss the opportunity. If our last recommendation here is, even though this is other people's money, the federal money, you might want to include that success or lack of success in your annual reports that go to the commissions. So you know how effective you are in applying those federal programs. And if you're not very effective, you might want to take another look at it. Again, you have to follow the federal requirements here. If you don't, I'm going to sick Keith Weiner on you, and he'll explain strict scrutiny and intermediate scrutiny for hours on end. And you can't go beyond those federal requirements. But again, our advice to you is pay particular attention to this, because this is real opportunities that should be going to diverse businesses. Any questions here? Okay, we have another few recommendations for you. And it gets to the disparity study. So I'll go over these quickly. I think this is in preparing for a disparity study. There's no prohibition on getting all the data that you would need for a disparity study now. And there's no prohibition on monitoring annual minority and women business utilization and breaking that down, as we've discussed in this meeting, by race and ethnic group and for industries. And if possible, participate in a joint study with other Twin Cities entities. So this is a bit old news by the time we're putting this slide up, because I think you all are and staff are having those conversations. And then we've already talked about point 6, which is you really need to look at those disparity study results to see what groups should be involved. It would not be constitutional for you to be extending benefits of a program that are race and gender conscious to groups for which you do not have evidence of barriers or discrimination or disparities. And so that's part of the meeting the strict scrutiny test or the intermediate scrutiny test for women-owned businesses. And then you need to monitor results. And then finally, I have a long memory. Again, I did that disparity study 25 years ago. This is a program that will not immediately solve these issues. So you will need to have patience with us, strong implementation, strong monitoring, and periodic review. Programs that are constitutional have sunset provisions so that they don't just run forever without looking at them and seeing if they're effective or they need to be redirected. The entities in the local area have done disparity studies, not just once, but multiple times. So you need to keep updating the information to see what the current needs and barriers are. And hopefully you don't need these programs at some point in the future. That's the point. Any questions here?
Yes. Commissioner Reinhardt, please.
I apologize because I cannot see, I don't have a second screen right now. And so trying to, and because it's not share screen, I can't see all of the recommendations in front of me right now. Anyway, that's technology. We'll get that all figured out. But regardless, my question is pretty straightforward. My understanding of what has been said, not only in the first section, but in this, I think it's the final two sections of this, is that there is information that we need verified, that we need to, the research needs to be done on so that we can move forward in substantial implementation. And that gets to the strict scrutiny and the intermediate scrutiny in order to really make progress on this. Do we have something, and I think this would go to the county manager, do we have that process in place so that we can move forward, as I think the word you used was methodical way? Or are we still missing those pieces that are basically what the conclusions are as far as where we're at, on which we base our legal standing for implementation?
Madam Chair.
Or are they still needed?
Excuse me. Madam Chair, Commissioner Reinhardt, some things are still needed. They are not done through this process. There will be another joint disparity study based on the timeline of the last one done soon with the entities that have been referenced here today. It would be the ideal preference to be a part of that, but if that doesn't move us quickly enough, we need to evaluate other options as a part of that work. And that's a question I do not have an answer or a recommendation for you today. I want to highlight that. On the workforce side, additional work to be done there as well. The county board has adopted some aspirational goals. It's time to move beyond that. And I think what you're hearing are those steps to do that. But I do not come here today pretending it's all ready to go. This is really that step of laying out where we now need to go.
Thank you. That was very helpful because yes, the aspirational goals, we are all 100% and more behind. But I appreciate knowing where we're at in that timeline. And if we need to move faster, we can.
Thank you for the question again. And just to be sure that we are all on the same page in our understanding, I do want to go back to the recommendations that are under number 3 and be certain that my understanding of the recommendations under 1, 2, and 3, given the provisions under number 3, must be followed, that those recommendations do not require a disparity study or additional research beyond the robust preparation that the county manager has described as necessary in moving them forward. That strictly tailored, focused on race or gender and industry solutions will require a disparity study. I just want to make certain that those 2 pages that we are seeing as recommendations for moving this work forward are not contingent upon a disparity study. I have to repeat that again just because I want to make sure I am not confused. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Carter, and I'm going to go to Elizabeth Tolsman to share some additional context. What I want to say, though, is we need to timeline this out in terms of implementation. And so there's a part of this where these are laid out today thematically by buckets of work, but not necessarily by schedule of implementation. And I think that matters to your question because it allows me to fully distill that. But And so there's a part where that's a follow-up step to today's conversation, but I do want to turn to Director Tolzman to more specifically answer the question.
Thank you, County Manager O'Connor. If maybe I could help summarize what we heard from the report and our next steps. This might give us some good summary remarks. Just want to be clear that given the report that we received from Keene, we cannot move on any race or gender conscious programs absent a disparity study. With that said, I think the report and recommendations affirms that Ramsey County is doing some really great things in some neutral programs that we've been advancing. So I think some key next steps is, and first of all, I just want to mention, because the question about best value came up, we are engaging in best value training alongside Hennepin County. Our procurement office is working on that right now, so we are engaging in that practice. But I want to make sure that we're keeping our end goal in mind, and that is really about building wealth within our minority communities through this work. And it's important that we keep that in mind not only with our nonprofits, but our overall community and our goals of well-being, opportunity, and prosperity. So keeping those goals in mind and that accountability piece as well. And so I think we need to keep that framework in mind as we move on towards the next steps. The second thing we need to work on is our continued targeted outreach. We can target these businesses, programs, MBEs, WEEs. We just can't make a decision or provide preference on it in our decision making, is my understanding of this. The third thing that we need to do is build our program. What is that going to look like? And through our PCAT teams, through working with our legal department, we'll be able to come up with that program or what those programs look like, what certification entities we may dip into, those DBEs, TGBs, whatever it may be, and we'll use Keene's guidance on what we can or cannot do in that. The fourth thing is really about monitoring and evaluation. I think that in the next 1 to 2 years, we want to ensure that we monitor and continue to evaluate our work and our progress as we move in this direction. And finally, as Commissioner McDonough mentioned, is really being not only aspirational, but assertive in meeting our goals. So we need to determine what those goals are and work aggressively and assertively towards that. I think that at the end of in the next 2 to 3 years, we can assess and see where we are at in terms of that. And if we are not even close to meeting those goals, then I think there will be a good conversation for doing a disparity study in the near future.
Thank you very much. That does help me, as it does separate the things that we can do today based on our neutral programming versus the things that would require a disparity study to focus and to strictly construct in areas of disparities programs to address the market needs and Ramsey County programs. All right, once again, ready to move forward.
Okay, we have one more slide, and it's very much in line with what was just mentioned. So what are the next steps that we recommend? And it's pretty much what Elizabeth just said. You have taken steps, you can continue to take steps. There's more that you can do without a disparity study. We have them in the report. Staff is reviewing a draft report, and we'll be able to issue a final report to the county with all of what we found and some of the details of our recommendations. The third point on the slide, and I'm sorry, Commissioner Reinhardt, that maybe you're not seeing these, but the first two we're continue what you're doing now. Look at the report conclusions and recommendations, what you can immediately implement. So you don't need to wait on a disparity study to do a lot of this stuff. The third is probably the most important bullet on this slide is this does not come at no staff time or cost to the county. You need to review the resources for full implementation. And frankly, I think the county has some of the issues that our other clients have, and COVID-19 is not helping this, where you want to do all these things, but there's simply not enough staff, not enough resources to be able to implement all of them. And so just to be able to track a construction contract that you have an SBE contract goal on, and then be able to sanction or penalize a contractor that's violated that contract, has not fulfilled the terms of the contract, or take whatever measure is appropriate, that requires resources. And that may be one example of where you might be falling short. You need stronger language in your contracts and then more enforcement to be able to make sure you're getting the small business participation. And that's the means now that you have to get diverse business participation in your, as subcontractors in your contracts. And that's just one example. All the outreach we've talked about to diverse businesses to encourage them to get smart about how to bid on county procurement and know when those procurements are coming out, that requires county resources to go do. That has a payoff. You're going to have more competition and be building local businesses in a way that you would otherwise would not be able to do, but it's still, you need to put that upfront investment in. So that's the third bullet on the slide. And then finally, just consider bringing a fully developed contract equity program back to the county commissioners for approval. That is something that we recommended. It may be that you legally do not need to do this, but it may have a stronger and more comprehensive, it may have more impact, especially if you are able to add the price and evaluation preference, that 5% preference to certified businesses. That in particular may need county commissioner approval for the county to be able to implement it. And the idea that you may want to have overall aspirational MBE and WBE goals that kind of state the commitment of the county commissioners to equity in your procurement, that might also be something that would come back for full county commission approval to make that statement to the community. So we recommended that all of this be integrated into one contract equity program with the reporting, with the resources that looks at across industries, across the barriers that may exist now in county procurement for small and diverse businesses, and bring it back for your approval. Again, that's our recommendation. There may be a better way to do this that staff may be able to come up with. We wanted to give you the benefit of our thinking.
Madam Chair, if I could just add to the final recommendations, I would say I and everybody else here in Ramsey County who has been in a leadership role in this endorse the recommendations without suggested edit. I appreciate the comment about resource and how to think about that at a time when we got to be careful of building up internal structures without forward-facing service during a pandemic. It's a conversation we'll continue to have. That does not mean we cannot find ways to move forward. It's just a consideration we'll keep talking about. And we will be bringing on project management office resources to help support the move forward. That's an important part of our work to ensure we stay on task and focused on this, and that this is somebody's task to do, not just an add-on to others as we lead and continue driving forward. So that project management office that the county created, this is one of those good reasons as to why. And I look forward to bringing back additional work to the county board in the months ahead. Thank you for all your feedback today.
Thank you. Also, I want to make certain that we grab a couple of last questions before we move on, and we do have more to do in our meeting. This has been a substantial presentation. We appreciate it. I will call on Commissioner McDonough and then Commissioner McGuire. Thank you. Commissioner McDonough.
Yep, thanks, Chair Carter. One quick comment as I was listening to Mr. Keaton talk about the resource piece, and that's certainly a critical piece here, and Ryan, you acknowledged that. I do want to remind us as we're looking at this that a couple of years ago, we actually funded a half-time attorney in the county attorney's office to actually do a better job on debarring contractors that don't comply with our requirements. And that was focused in on prevailing wage requirements and some of those other ones. But we may already have some resources, or we may be able to position our contracts under all the strict scrutiny, all these other legal terms, where that can maybe be broadened, where we, can actually already utilize some of the resources we've put in place for other reasons, but we can broaden it to include some of these. And so I just bring that up for us to be thinking about. And then for our consultants, one of the issues I raised early on, and I've just, I don't know enough about this by any means, but, I talked about, it's interesting how, and I do appreciate Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and her leadership and and we're going to miss that terribly. But I mean, you can see the institutional racism built into that. We can do less restrictive scrutiny on gender-based versus based on race, right? So there's a racism built into that already. We acknowledge there's discrimination and harm caused based on gender, and we've already kind of we're starting to chew away at that a little bit, but we haven't opened the door on that when it comes to racism and minority based. One of the issues I raised earlier is really taking a look at where we're restricted because of statutes or where we don't have. And I'm wondering, because you've worked nationally with other clients in so many states, are there states that have started taking a look at legislation or statutes that can help local governments and the state do better in this, to be more permissive, or to eliminate some of the barriers when we're taking a look at trying to provide opportunities? Are there already examples of states that have done some of that? And is that some of the things we could start taking a look at here for Minnesota?
So yes, and Minnesota is one of those states. You just need to take better advantage of the tools that they've given counties. So the going up to 250,000 through the informal procurement, that is available only to counties. It's not available to cities. It's available to counties in Minnesota. So that's a very targeted measure that the state passed. You use that tool now, but you're not getting the impact from that tool. So that is rare in the nation, that you can go up to 250,000 as a local government, and if you have diverse or small business participation as bidders in your solicitations. So that we are actually recommending that elsewhere based on Minnesota passing that. The allowance to do a price preference is also rare in state law. Minnesota has provided, it appears that they have provided you that tool. And that's something that you're not using now that we're suggesting that you take a look at. So I don't think you need to look much further than Minnesota. You're one of the more progressive states to give local governments those tools to be able to address equity.
Thank you. And I guess I'm not surprised.
Thank you, Commissioner McGuire, and then Commissioner Reinhardt.
I love it, Madam Chair. I love it when we're as progressive as we think we are and want to be in some cases. I think sometimes we think we're more progressive than we really are, but that's a good point. And I appreciate Commissioner McDonough asking that question on legislation. I'm going to ask the question that we've been sort of asking all meeting, and I appreciate Commissioner Carter bringing this up. I came into this thinking, okay, we're approving a disparity study. I mean, that's what we need to do. That's what we need to do. But then I'm looking at it and it says, if we fall short of aspirational goals, then we should do a disparity study. And I'm looking at this next steps on 4, the final page here. Consider bringing fully developed contract equity program for locally funded contracts. Would that equity program include a disparity study, or is it because of a disparity study that we would be able to bring that, or where does the disparity study fit into this? Can you see us doing any of this without a disparity study is what I'm wondering. I'm guessing not. So just within those steps on the last page of your presentation, where's the disparity study fit in there?
So one of the focuses of our research was, what can you do now and that you don't have to wait to do? And what can staff do if they've gotten authorization from the commission to move as aggressively as you can without having a disparity study? Our presentation is basically that. You may or may not be as successful as you want to be with those measures, and may still need to do a disparity study to see if you can justify and adopt more stronger tools. But those studies, that would be, if you started one today, if you said, can you start working, A year from now, we would have some results for you. And you don't want to wait. It sounds like, listening to the discussion, you still want to be doing things in that year. You don't want to lose a year or 2 years or 3 years. And that's probably a realistic time frame, especially if you do a joint disparity study. It's a number of years down the road. We developed a set of recommendations for you to be really clear. And Madam Chair asked the question at least 3 times. And I said yes at least 3 times. These recommendations could be put into a contract equity program that's stronger than what you have now, would be more strongly monitored by leadership and commissioners than what you have now, and we think would lead to better results than what you have now, but still might not get you to where you want to be. But there's no point in waiting and doing nothing when you can do something stronger.
And thank you for that restatement, because I know that Commissioner Carter's been asking that question the whole morning. So do you think we should start thinking about a disparity study? Because otherwise we wait a year doing all this work, and then we realize, oh, we can't reach our goals without a disparity study, but then we've lost a year. What do you think of that question? What do you think?
Well, we're pro disparity studies because we do them. So we think we're providing a valuable service. The question for you all is whether you move now or whether you move in step with the other local governments in the Twin Cities. Okay. And there's definitely pros and cons to each. And that would be above my pay grade, certainly, to be able to give you advice on that.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Mr. Carter, if I may.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was just going to add, in addition, Commissioner McGuire, to your question relating to what you can do now and the need to proceed and do things and not wait that Dave has mentioned, the courts actually require that local governments, as part of the narrowly tailored prong of that analysis we've been discussing, to engage in what the courts term serious consideration of neutral measures that are feasible and workable in connection with your contracting. So outreach efforts, various different unbundling, all these types of programs, training, all these types of assistance that you can provide to contractors that are considered neutral because they're not race and gender or ethnic based in terms of contracting elements or awards. Neutral measures are something you should be seriously considering and doing, because that's actually part of a disparity study and is part of the analysis that you have to go into in determining what kind of program you're going to develop based on the results of the study. It's one of the main factors of the narrowly tailored prong is what that is, and that language is universally used by the court. So that's something they want to see that you have done, you have engaged in, is these neutral measures you're discussing through all these other recommendations. So along with doing them and the practical and good effects of them, consequences for doing them, is that it helps you along the way in tailoring a program after a study is done.
Thank you. That really helps also. That helps me. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Commissioner Reinhardt?
Thank you. And again, I just want to state very clearly that I know that there are many things that we can do in the recommendations, and I appreciate that report and the recommendations and moving forward. There's no question in my mind about what we can do. But I also know, and what I think I heard from the county manager was that if we want to take it a step further and we want to put it so that it is legally enforceable as a preference as we move forward, and even if we can't do that, we need the disparity study. And what I heard him say was that we are going to move forward with that, either in conjunction with the other partners in the region and state, or if we need to do it sooner so that we can be as aggressive and assertive as we possibly can be in this, that will be considered as well. So I'm not trying to say in any way, shape, or form that we should stop what we're doing. That's not my intent here. But I do think I'm a little exuberant about moving forward quickly beyond even what we can do right now without the disparity study. So I think getting something back from the county manager on really what that does look like when that study either jointly or independently would be done, I think is going to be important for us. We've been waiting a long time for this. And so, yes, I think my excitement is showing as far as going forward even further to get the best outcomes we possibly can. Thank you.
Once again, we very much appreciate the report, the recommendations, and the parsing through of next steps. And it appears that all of us are exuberant about the opportunity to add to our work to ensure that we have the kind of inclusive environment for businesses and for all of Ramsey County residents that is needed to move us forward along our pathway in our strategic goals of health and well-being and prosperity for all. So I want to appreciate it. I don't want to summarize in large, taking a long time to summarize today because we've had a lot of summary as we have gone on. We are moving toward the conclusion of our time with the consultants. I'm looking to see if there are additional questions. You know, what we do appreciate is that given all of the work that we are doing in Ramsey County, there is a great need to do better, and better we can do. There are some recommendations in front of us for things that will enhance the tools that we have today that are neutral to race and gender in our small business enterprise programs. Our staff will be taking it upon themselves to look carefully at those recommendations for what we can do together and to put forward a recommendation of steps that we can and will, and with commissioner agreement, be able to take to move us forward today. There's much more because we're in this for the long term that we perceive we need to do based on the preliminary data that we have about the disparities that may exist based on what we know about the market and what we know about our county and our programs. And we need to match that so that we can understand through the eyes of a disparity study what we will be able to do to more specifically target those areas of disparities that exist for us. We are looking forward to that longer term work as well. And staff will be preparing for us a recommendation as to how we can get to that place as well. So we're going to be hearing back, but this information, which has been substantial and very helpful today, is greatly appreciated. I'm looking and there are no further questions. I will turn it back to the consultant and county manager for final comments, if there are any. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'll just thank the group from Keene and everybody who presented here today for their wisdom and expertise in this space and bringing that perspective that's broader than just Ramsey County. Thanks to commissioners for weighing in and helping to establish that path forward. We're glad to hear that the recommendations align with a shared approach to wanting to move forward, more to come here as we go. And with that, I'm going to pivot us briefly. Director Tolzman and I have been talking as we go. We know you still have a legislative update and some commissioner updates, and we're closing in on noon. We are going to defer on the strategic plan piece to the strategic team day, just based on timing here today, Madam Chair, and instead say the written update is done. We can provide that. The next quarterly update will likely be a focus on that topic as we have an opportunity with the strategic team. But we wanted to give today's conversation around the workforce, contracting, inclusion, and where to go next the time it needed first. And so that would be our planned approach to continue forward.
Thank you very much. Although we would welcome hearing that update on the strategic plan today, we'll defer to your advice regarding how to handle that at a later point, and we will move forward then in the balance of our agenda beyond workshop. And so, commissioners, we will have the opportunity to hear the strategic plan update at a later point in time. Thank you to all. That sets us then in our agenda at our legislative update. I will call on Commissioner McGuire for the update prior to County Connections and our board and member updates as well.
And Madam Chair, if it's appropriate, we are going to sign off.
Yes.
My apologies. Yes.
Thank you very much for making the enormous amount of time for us this morning. We all appreciate it. And it's been a pleasure working with staff and you all on this important subject. So
thank you so very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Stay safe, everybody.
Stay safe.
All right.
Goodbye.
Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I will, there we go. This is the legislative report. So I want to thank Jennifer O'Rourke and Cassie Fitzgerald, who are continuing to monitor the legislative work that's being done. So as you know, the state had a cooling off period by which they couldn't pass a bonding bill last session, the last special session that they had. So that blackout time expired on Sunday, so a couple days ago, but the legislature didn't meet. So we're thinking they haven't reached agreement yet and still waiting on our bills that are part of what we're hoping might still pass, which is our Recycling and Energy Center, our Battle Creek Winter Rec, 35E, County Road J are still all up for consideration in the bonding bills. So we are hopeful that they will meet in special session, and they're talking about maybe coming back around October 12th. They'd have to come back to affirm the governor's executive orders at that time, and then hopefully there's an agreement on a bonding bill. So I think we're all really just working our legislators. They know how important it is to us, and so we just hope that would pass, but we don't know. Today's the first hearing of the House Select Committee on Racial Justice, and Representative Rena Moran, our chair of our delegation in Ramsey County here, she's a co-chair of that. And both Jennifer and Cassie are going to be covering that committee. And their first hearing is about maternal child health, mortality and morbidity, and Black reproductive health. So this is a really good sign that the legislature is, putting importance on these issues, and that our own Representative Moran is a huge part of that. So on the federal front, we all know that big focus is on the passing of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the politics around her replacement. So just mourning that loss, as I know we all are. But the federal government is also talking about the budget, a potential government shutdown, and more aid for state and local governments for COVID relief. These are all things that are on their potential plate for work. So we're paying special attention to anything that allows spending to go into 2021. We would like for this to happen so that we're not forced to allocate all of those dollars before the end of the year. And we also are looking for aid that would allow for lost revenues. This has not traditionally been part of their packages, but we've been working with them, NACO, AMC, everyone's been working with our federal government to see if we could apply lost revenues to some of those dollars, or apply those dollars to lost revenues. So with that, Madam Chair, I just want to say thanks again to Jennifer and Cassie for all their work. And if you have any questions, we're keeping our fingers crossed and keeping we're keeping in touch with our legislators on all of this. And thanks to Commissioner Mattis-Castillo for co-chairing our legislative team, which we continue to meet weekly on how we're doing. And I know we're talking to our delegation to see if they would like another informational hearing. We've been having those, and they seem to appreciate, the legislators seem to appreciate, getting information from us. So we're looking into having another one of those perhaps in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you very much, Commissioner McGuire. I have Commissioner Reinhardt's hand up. Commissioner Reinhardt.
I just wanted to also state that when we talk about how important these projects are to us, at the county from the state bonding bill. What we're really talking about is the economy and jobs for people.
Yeah.
And especially now, what we need. So it's not just that the county needs this. They are important projects, but it's really about moving forward and revitalizing our economy. And at the national level, I was recently asked what I would do differently for responding to COVID-19. And my answer was that I would work even harder to make sure that people hear the message that they need to contact their legislators at the federal level and at the state level to get the money to local governments so that we can assist individuals and businesses in the recovery. I know that politics are being played with this, but it's really about people's lives. And so I figured I would take this opportunity to put my words and thoughts into action and to try to get everyone to really make sure that they understand what our requests are about. And it's about them and their families and their businesses. And we need those funds and the program changes to get it done. So double down and get it done. Thank you.
Thank
Well
you.
said.
Double down, get it done. Commissioner Matas Castillo.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I also just wanted to share a quick update. We received early notification that the Great River Rail Line, that is a project that we have proposed in the bonding bill, formerly known as the second train from Chicago, did receive funding from the federal government. It will become official as an announcement comes out later this week, and that is a project of $31.8 million that we have requested and supported in the bonding bill. The match that Minnesota is required to give is $10 million. And so that money is now on the table. We need, and going with Commissioner Reinhardt, is that we need to get this done so that we have those funds available. And just to remind people that this is not only just about a second train that will have multiple stops through southern Minnesota all the way to Chicago, making that transportation more accessible and more stops, but this is again jobs and the economy, because most of this money would be spent in Minnesota because the project that the repairs and the replacement need to happen in Minnesota. So that's another $31.8 million that has been awarded or will be awarded pending our match here in Minnesota. So good news. It's a good long step. It was a long journey, but we still have work to do to get the bonding bill in place.
And so dreams really do come true. Thank you. I'd like to turn to County Manager O'Connor for our County Connections.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I do not have any county connections to share with everyone this morning. I think the workshop and the work happening there to connect many areas of our organization will stand as today's county connections. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And for the space to move then to commissioner updates, it's been a while because of workshops and our meetings that we've had this time. And it is short time, in fact, that we have before noon, but we will spend the time that we need. I will go first to Commissioner Fretham.
Thank you. I'll be quick. I just want to mention a great event I virtually attended last week or the week before that we didn't update on last year, that the League of Women Voters attended, answering election concerns, and it is available on YouTube. Posted the link in my newsletter and then also on my official commissioner Facebook page that people can link to. Lots of great information, and I know a lot of people are anxious about this election, and our elections team has been very good about presenting information, but this was just another event in the community that shared great information to address a lot of people's concerns, lots of questions, great information shared, and it is available to watch on YouTube.
Thank you very much for highlighting that, Commissioner Fretham. I'll turn again to Commissioner Matas Castillo for an update.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to share a couple events. We have a Rice Larpenter Coalition Alliance event this weekend called LARP and Tour, touring neighborhood businesses and activating the space. That's happening this Saturday from 3 to 7 p.m. Check in for your tour in the My Thrift Store parking lot. This is in big collaboration with the entire alliance. We also have folks from our Recycling and Energy Center that are doing outreach at that event. for our circular economy work that's happening. So lots of fun stuff happening. We invite the whole community to come out. We'll be doing some artwork and beautification, as well as getting information on local businesses. And then we have had two now. We have one more food distribution site that I really wanted to share at Marydale Park, just off Maryland Avenue, it's been specifically targeted at Korean families, so it's a culturally appropriate food distribution. And our first event, we had 130 adults. We weren't counting kids, although there's lots and lots of children that were there. We had 180 last week, and the next one will be on the 29th of next week, so people can plan ahead. But it is a free food distribution that's culturally appropriate, but it's open to everyone. And other resources are also available, so I wanted to share. And then quickly, I wanted to give a special shout out to Rick Broughton from IS Services, who went above and beyond over the weekend and yesterday, and has spent a lot of time helping me get my technology up and running. And turns out it wasn't just user error, but I had some serious tech difficulties, and he went the distance to go deep and find it. So I just wanted to give a shout out. IS has done a great job supporting not only all of us, but the county as we move to this new way of working, and a special shout out to Rick for helping me. Thanks.
Commissioner McDonough.
No report.
Commissioner McGuire. Commissioner McGuire, you're on mute.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, there's just a lot going on, so I'm just going to try and do it really, I'll try and do it really quickly. I'll start out with, TAB has met, a couple of times now, and we're doing an arterial BRT project that we're really focusing on, hoping to get an East Metro project in there with the Rice Street. So I know Commissioner Mattis Castillo, Brian Isaacson, we're all going to be working really hard with our East Metro partners to make sure that the one ABRT, they're going to put $25 million into it, will be funded. And so we're hoping we get a Rice, we have several projects in that mix, and we're focusing on our Rice Street project. So that goes south into Dakota County. And so we are working on that. And then just another thing that happened with TAB is that the Southwest Corridor got their $1 billion from the federal government. I think we all heard about that. So that's exciting for that corridor to give us our regional system. The library board met, and thanks to our county manager O'Connor who came and spoke. They were happy to meet with him. This is our library board that's very interested in being very involved in all of our issues. And they were happy to meet with him, and they want to meet with us. And I think I've been talking to you about that they want to meet with the Ramsey County Board, which is, I think, a good idea, so we can be aligned on all our values and have upcoming conversations about roles and responsibilities with them. So that's good. They also did Jill's performance review, so that happened then. The AMC Board of Directors met, and I know that a number of us were on that call. I just want to let you all know that there was a decision made to extend the terms of all of the Board of Directors members of the AMC. It's been such an uncertain time, and we felt that it was we needed to have the stability of the board. So all executive board and board members, committee chairs are all going to extend their term for one more year so that we have stability within the AMC. And just to let you know, I'm so proud of AMC. We're doing work with Braver Angels, where we're connecting Metro and rural members to have conversations. We had conversations with Bill Doherty, and we're in a book club discussion called Love Your Enemies. We're discussing the book Love Your Enemies, and I totally recommend this book. It's about how we can get along with people that you disagree with. And in this political polarization, AMC is really working hard to help give us the tools that we need to bridge those divides. So I'm really proud of AMC for that. Ramsey County League of Local Government had a great meeting. I just can't encourage all of you enough to try and go to those meetings. we had a technology session on this time, and we learned all about the different technology groups that are working on keeping us connected. The next week, next time is October 9th, and we're doing mental health issues. So we're going to have a couple of people from Ramsey County on the panel, also Northeast Youth and Family Services, Suburban Ramsey Family Collaborative. There's going to be people talking about mental health. That is the topic that the league, the board of directors agreed we would focus on for the year is mental health issues. So those will be really good meetings. And so I just want to encourage you to all go to that. We had an active living meeting. Continuing, we did a Rice Street visioning study. Scott McBride, in his new role, did a visioning study for Rice Street. It was wonderful. I encourage you can look at that. And then I will conclude, Madam Chair, with saying that I was honored to be appointed by Governor Walz to the Governor's Blue Ribbon Committee on Metropolitan Council Structure and Services. And so I'm serving on that with people from the entire region, chaired by Mary Liz Holberg. And so we had our first meeting, which was an overview of Met Council, and we're going to be discussing their structure and services. So I'm honored to be a part of that group. And with that, Madam Chair, I will end my another note that today's National Voter Registration Day. So if people haven't registered to vote, go register. And I know that's go on to our website and you can do that. So with that, Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you for that plug as well and your report. Commissioner Ortega?
Madam Chair, I have some construction going on downtown, so if it's problematic, just cut me off. I'll quickly give you an update on the Food and Basic Needs Group. We have extensions from the USDA, extended our waivers through the end of the year or until the funds run out. And as of August, we have served 16,000 meals, and we have let out 14 contracts most recently, with another big push coming up in the next couple of weeks. And we are updating our online food resource map as we put the contracts in place. I'll leave it at that, Madam Chair, given that I have a lot of noise going on downtown here.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I hope that ends soon. Commissioner Reinhardt.
Thank you. Well, as we all know, we've been Zooming and Teaming and WebExing all over the place in so many meetings. So instead of going through all of that, although I do have to say that the Chamber of Commerce Awards, Government Leadership Awards, that many of us attended was just fabulous. But I want to focus more in on some of the things that I've been hearing from my constituents. One is regarding the library. And yes, I do know that the library board is very much looking forward to partnering with us. And I look forward to the conversation as we pursue our goals of prosperity, opportunity, well-being for all. And also looking at what are we going to be doing as far as opening. There are different models that have been used with St. Paul, with the other counties and municipalities around us as far as opening up more services. And so I know that we are supposed to be getting some information on that from the library director in conjunction with what we are doing throughout the changing system of how we provide services. So I'm looking forward to that, and hopefully we can get more services that can be in person, even though it wouldn't be exactly as it was before. There was also discussion about utilizing maybe some of the libraries when we have our second public hearing on the budget, to have different locations where people can go to participate so that they can call in rather than just listening. So, and I know that we're looking at different opportunities there as well. So I think that's an exciting idea. And finally, regarding the budget, I do have, I've had a number of requests for information about the addendum regarding the ponds and gaining that revenue for the county through 2021. And so the ponds addendum is now on the Ramsey County website on my webpage for people that want to view that. So I guess I did say finally already, but my census shirt is still up. We need to make sure that people are responding to the census. Time is running out, so get that done as well. Thank you.
And thank you, Commissioner. I do want to share just a few things. It's already been mentioned that we were able to attend the St. Paul Chambers Leaders in Local Government Awards, and congratulations again to all of our leaders in local government, those recognized and those who are continuing to lead even beyond the recognition. They don't do it for that reason, but it's great when they are recognized. I also want to highlight that a number of things have been going on. The AMC board in its last meeting extended board member and officer terms due to COVID-19. And so Commissioner Mary Jo McGuire will still be in process toward her AMC presidency. We also had the opportunity, I, together with Commissioner Matas Castillo, to attend a recent convening by MCCD, the Metropolitan Council of Community Development, regarding advocacy toward a rebuilding package of the legislature. Should have mentioned that, forgot to during the legislative update. I attended a Capital Region Watershed District meeting virtually, at which a longstanding member, I think he's been there 4 terms now, Seitu Jones, was exiting service on the Capital Region Watershed District, and was able to wish him, very, very good retirement from Watershed, but not from our community, because he is certainly a vibrant participant. But to say thank you so much from the entire county board. Our Policy Advisory Committee, Scoping Committee will be meeting soon, focusing on the COVID Response Policy Advisory Committee and the potential need to create a child care subcommittee. So we'll be calling together a chair and members to look at scoping, and a recommendation that will likely go back then to the larger policy advisory group for the creation of that child care team. For lack of time, I do want to conclude my comments now. And also, we are afternoon, but having had the opportunity to share updates together is always a good thing to do. Thank you for your tolerance as we extended the meeting to be able to do that. I am looking at the agenda, and we are at the point of adjournment. And so, without further ado, and looking forward to our workshop also this afternoon, which is at 1:30. Residents First, Promoting Change and Instilling Hope Through a Science to Service Approach. It will be a virtual meeting. It will be chaired by Commissioner Matas Castillo. And thank you very much. We will see you again then. Have a good lunch at 1:30. Our meeting's adjourned.
Take care.
Take care, everybody.